Hello everyone, and welcome to the DXD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei awakened the Supreme Dragon System and ruled all Pantheons. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Awakening Beyond Boosted Gear. Blood. The taste of it filled Issei Hyodo's mouth as he crashed through the canopy of trees, his body carving a trench into the forest floor. Pain blossomed across his ribcage where the blast had caught him squarely. Above, through splintered branches, the night sky pulsed with unnatural violet light. Pathetic, a voice echoed through the clearing. This is the Red Dragon Emperor. The one they're all so worried about. Issei spat crimson onto the dirt and forced himself to one knee. His boosted gear gleamed in the strange light, the emerald jewel flickering erratically. Something was wrong. The familiar connection to Ddraig felt stretched thin, like an elastic band pulled to its breaking point. Ddraig, Issei whispered, his breath creating small clouds in the suddenly frigid air. What's happening? No response came from the sacred gear. Instead, hairline fractures spread across the jewel's surface, something Issei had never seen before. The attacker descended slowly from above, suspended in a corona of that same sickly light. Humanoid but wrong, with skin that shifted like mercury and eyes that reflected nothing. Your dragon is otherwise occupied, boy. We've made sure of that. Issei catalogued his options with desperate clarity. His friends from the Occult Research Club were handling another crisis across town, a convenient diversion, he now realized. His sacred gear was malfunctioning. His body was battered beyond what even his devil physiology could quickly repair. And yet, something deeper than his conscious mind refused to yield. Who are you? Issei demanded, forcing strength into his voice that his body couldn't currently back up. What do you want? The figure tilted its head at an impossible angle. I am merely the harvester. And you, child, have been growing something very precious without knowing it. The air pressure changed suddenly, as if the atmosphere itself was being compressed. Issei felt it in his eardrums, in his sinuses, in his very bones. 3 more figures materialized at equidistant points around him, each identical to the first. The Supreme Dragon is stirring, they spoke in perfect unison. We will extract it before you ruin everything. Supreme Dragon, Issei repeated, genuinely confused. I only have Ddraig. His world exploded into pain. The 4 figures had extended their hands, and threads of that violet energy now burrowed into his chest. His forehead, his sacred gear. Issei screamed as something fundamental within him was violated, as if they were trying to peel his soul away layer by layer. Inside his mind, Ddraig's voice suddenly thundered, distant but desperate. Partner, they're trying to wake it too soon. Resist them. Wake what? Issei shouted aloud, his body contorting as the energy threads pulled tighter. Ddraig, what's happening to me? The truth. Ddraig's voice fragmented like static on a radio. Not just me inside. Always more. Supreme System. The pain reached impossible heights. Issei's vision tunneled, darkness encroaching from all sides. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, too fast, too erratic. The boosted gear's jewel cracked further, emerald light spilling out like liquid. One of the attackers approached, mercury hand reaching toward Issei's chest. The seed is ready. We will extract it now. Something snapped inside Issei. Not physically, but deeper, as if a door sealed since his birth had suddenly been blown off its hinges. The world slowed to a crawl. His consciousness expanded exponentially, rushing outward like water breaching a dam. Suddenly he feel everything. Every tree in the forest, every star in the sky, every dimensional barrier separating the realms. And dragons. Thousands upon thousands of dragons across countless realities, their presence burning like stars in his expanded awareness. What is this? Issei whispered, his voice resonating strangely as if multiple versions of himself were speaking simultaneously. The Supreme Dragon System, Ddraig's voice returned. Clearer now. The truth I couldn't tell you until it awakened itself. The attacker's hand stopped centimeters from Issei's chest, suddenly unable to advance further. Impossible. The extraction process should have weakened the host, not triggered activation. Issei felt power rushing into him from dimensions he couldn't name, as if every dragon that had ever existed was suddenly lending him their strength. The fractured jewel in his sacred gear shattered completely, but instead of destroying the boosted gear, it transformed. New crystalline structures erupted across the gauntlet. Not just green but prismatic, reflecting colors Issei had never seen before. "You made a mistake," Issei said, his voice deadly calm as he rose to his feet. The pain was gone, replaced by clarity so intense it bordered on ecstasy. "Whatever you thought I was, I'm becoming something else entirely." The four attackers retreated simultaneously, their mercury forms rippling with what could only be fear. "Contain him. The Harbinger was wrong. This one cannot be harvested." They launched a coordinated attack, violet energy condensing into spears of darkness that would have annihilated any ordinary being. Issei didn't dodge, he didn't need to. The energy simply passed through him, as if he existed partially in another dimension. The transformed gauntlet on his arm pulsed, and suddenly his body was covered in armor unlike any he'd manifested before. Not the red of Ddrake's power, but something iridescent and constantly shifting, as if each plate reflected a different draconic lineage. "I don't understand what's happening to me," Issei said, examining his transformed arm with wonder. "But I know you're a threat to everything I care about." He moved, and reality seemed to blur around him. One moment he stood in the center of their formation, the next, he was directly before one of the attackers. The creature tried to retreat, but Issei's armored hand shot forward, catching it by what passed for its throat. "What are you?" Issei demanded. The creature thrashed in his grip, its mercury skin bubbling where Issei touched it. "We are the Void's children. You cannot stop what comes." Before Issei could question it further, the creature's form destabilized completely, collapsing into a puddle of quicksilver that evaporated into nothingness. The remaining three attackers shrieked in what might have been rage or terror, then launched themselves at him simultaneously. Time slowed again in Issei's perception. Knowledge flooded into his consciousness. Fighting techniques he'd never learned, magical systems he'd never studied, languages he'd never heard. His body moved with perfect precision, each motion exactly what was needed. One attacker was bisected by a blade of concentrated energy that extended from Issei's gauntlet. Another disintegrated when Issei breathed out a torrent of flame unlike any he'd produced before, flame that burned in spiraling patterns of gold and blue. The last attacker turned to flee, tearing open a portal in reality. Issei felt the dimensional coordinates in his mind, understood exactly where the creature was attempting to go. Without conscious thought, he extended his transformed gauntlet and closed the portal with a gesture. "You're not going anywhere," Issei said. The creature spun to face him, its form destabilizing at the edges. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. The convergence comes regardless. All we sought was to control its vector." "The what?" Issei demanded, advancing on the creature. "What convergence?" Instead of answering, the creature began to laugh, a horrible sound like metal grinding against itself. "Too late for questions, Dragon Emperor. The awakening has begun. Our failure here simply means others will come." The creature's body suddenly convulsed, mercury skin hardening into crystal that fractured from within. "The Void Harbinger knows your name now, Issei Hyodo. The Supreme Dragon is awake, and all the Pantheons will tremble." With those final words, the creature shattered into countless crystalline shards that dissolved into darkness, leaving Issei alone in the devastated clearing. The strange armor receded gradually, flowing back into the transformed boosted gear. Issei stared at the gauntlet, which now pulsed with multi-layered light, the familiar green still present but interwoven with countless other hues. "Ddrake," Issei said aloud, "what just happened to me? Something that wasn't supposed to happen for decades, partner." The dragon's voice sounded weary but relieved. "The Supreme Dragon system has awakened. You keep saying that, but what does it mean? What is the Supreme Dragon system? It means everything changes now. For you, for me, for every pantheon in existence." The air shifted again, but differently this time, a gentle pressure rather than the violent compression from before. A subtle scent like cherry blossom, ohms and ceremonial incense filled the clearing. Issei turned, instinctively sensing a new presence before he could see it. A woman stood at the edge of the devastated area, her beauty so perfect it seemed almost painful to behold. She wore a formal kimono of the deepest red, embroidered with golden patterns that seemed to shift and move on their own. Her hair flowed like liquid obsidian to her waist. And her eyes, Issei caught his breath. Her eyes contained light like the sun itself, banked but unmistakable. She surveyed the destruction with an expression of mild concern before her gaze settled on Issei. When she spoke, her voice carried the formality of imperial courts long forgotten. This one perceives that the awakening has occurred prematurely, she said. This is concerning. Issei stared, momentarily at a loss. Who are you? The woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both acknowledgement of the question and mild reproach for its directness. Is one is called Amaterasu Kagura in this current incarnation, she replied. This one has come to observe what the dragons have hidden within human form. Partner, Diedrag's voice urged in Issei's mind. You stand before the sun goddess of the Japanese pantheon. Issei immediately inclined his body forward in a formal bow, wincing as his battered muscles protested. Forgive my rudeness, he said, surprised to find formal language coming naturally to his lips. I am still adjusting to what has happened. Amaterasu's expression softened marginally. The discourtesy is understood given the circumstances. The awakening is typically more controlled. Her gaze sharpened suddenly. Those who attacked you, they were not of this realm. It wasn't a question, but Issei answered anyway. They called themselves the Void's children. They mentioned something about a convergence, and a harbinger. Amaterasu's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening slightly before her expression returned to careful neutrality. Then matters are progressing more rapidly than anticipated. She took 3 precise steps forward, each movement graceful beyond human capability. Issei Hyodo, bearer of the Red Dragon Emperor and now vessel of the Supreme Dragon System. This one would request your presence at a council of importance. Issei's mind spun with questions, but before he could voice any of them, a thunderous crack split the air. The ground beneath them trembled, and in the distance, a column of light erupted toward the heavens. What now? Issei muttered. Amaterasu's gaze turned toward the disturbance, her eyes narrowing. The consequences begin. The barriers between realms respond to your awakening. That's because of me, Issei asked incredulously. Indirectly, Amaterasu replied. Your existence, what you now contain, creates ripples across dimensional boundaries. Those who guard such boundaries will respond accordingly. As if summoned by her words, a circle of blinding white light appeared several meters away. It expanded rapidly, forming a portal through which stepped a woman whose appearance contrasted sharply with Amaterasu's formal perfection. The newcomer wore armor of burnished silver that left her arms bare, revealing intricate runic tattoos spiraling from wrist to shoulder. Her platinum blonde hair was partially braided back from her face, falling in a wild mane down her back. A massive spear was strapped across her back, and her ice blue eyes surveyed the scene with tactical precision before focusing on Issei with naked suspicion. So, she said, her voice carrying a faint accent Issei couldn't place, this is what breached the barriers between Midgard and Asgard. She strode forward confidently, hand resting on the hilt of a dagger at her waist. Doesn't look like much. Amaterasu turned toward the newcomer, her posture subtly shifting to something more defensive. Valkyrie. This one did not expect Asgard's response to be so immediate. The armored woman shrugged, a casual gesture at odds with the tension crackling in the air. When something punches a hole through dimensional space big enough to set off every warning rune in Yggdrasil, we don't exactly take our time. Her gaze returned to Issei, assessing him with cool calculation. I'm Freya Valkyrdottir, and you're either a threat to every pantheon in existence, or our unexpected salvation. I haven't decided which yet. Issei looked between the two women, representatives of different mythological pantheons, both focused on him with intensity that made his skin prickle. The transformed boosted gear pulsed on his arm, as if responding to their presence. I'm just Issei, he said finally. And until about 10 minutes ago, I thought I was just the Red Dragon Emperor. Now I don't know what I am. Freya's eyebrow arched. You expect us to believe you had no idea what you were harboring. The Supreme Dragon System has been a cosmic secret for millennia. He speaks truth. Amaterasu interjected. This one perceives no deception. The awakening was forced prematurely by outside intervention. The Void's children, Issei added. That's what they called themselves. Freya's expression darkened instantly. Void cultists. Here. Her hand moved from her dagger to the spear on her back. Where? I'll separate their heads from their bodies. Too late, Issei said. They sort of disintegrated. Both women stared at him with new intensity. You destroyed void agents? Freya asked, disbelief coloring her tone. Alone, with no training in your awakened abilities. Issei shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I don't think it was really me. It was like, knowledge and power just poured into me. My body knew what to do before my mind could catch up. It's the system. Diedrag's voice resonated within him. It contains the collective knowledge and power of all draconic entities across all dimensions. You accessed a fraction of it instinctively. Diedrag says it's the system, Issei relayed. Something about collective knowledge. Amaterasu and Freya exchanged significant looks. The implications are concerning, Amaterasu said delicately. That's one word for it, Freya replied, then focused on Issei again. Look, Dragon Boy, I don't know you, and I don't trust easily. But if the void cultists tried to force your awakening, it means something bigger is happening. I was sent to assess the dimensional breach, but this goes beyond my authority. She rolled her shoulders, as if preparing for something unpleasant. You need to come to Asgard. The Allfather will want to see you. Asgard, Issei repeated, momentarily overwhelmed. As in, Norse mythology Asgard. With Thor and Loki and all that. Freya's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. Your understanding is primitive, but essentially correct. Although if you mention the idiotic portrayals from your human entertainment to either of my brothers, I won't be responsible for the consequences. Brothers, Issei blinked. Wait, you're that Freya? Before the Valkyrie could respond, Amaterasu stepped forward smoothly, interposing herself between them. This one must respectfully disagree with the Valkyrie's proposal, she said, her formal tone barely masking the steel beneath. The Japanese Pantheon has prior claim in this matter. Issei Hyodo is on our sovereign territory, and the awakening occurred within our domain. Freya's eyes narrowed dangerously. Dimensional breaches supersede territorial claims. That's been established. Law since the Pantheon Concordat of the Third Age. The Concordat applies to hostile incursions, Amaterasu countered. This was an awakening event, not an attack. Tell that to the trees he demolished and the energy spike that nearly collapsed three-dimensional boundaries, Freya shot back. Issei looked between them, increasingly concerned as the air temperature fluctuated wildly, cooling near Freya and heating around Amaterasu. He was about to intervene when Diedrag's voice filled his mind again. This is just the beginning, partner. Your awakening will draw attention from every pantheon. The Supreme Dragon system exists outside their normal power structures, a wild card in their careful political balance. Great, Issei muttered. So I'm a political problem now. Both women turned to him simultaneously. You are not merely a problem, Amaterasu said, managing to make the word sound distasteful. You're potentially catastrophic, Freya added bluntly. Or revolutionary, depending on your choices. Issei squared his shoulders, drawing on a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Look, I appreciate that this is apparently a big deal, but I have friends who might be in danger. Those things attacked me while my friends were handling another incident across town. I need to make sure they're okay. Your concern for your companions is commendable, Amaterasu acknowledged. This one can assure you that the diversionary incident has been contained. Your companions from the Devil faction are unharmed. Issei's eyes widened. You know about that too. About me being a devil. Freya snorted. Your devil status is the least interesting thing about you now, Dragon Boy. A new tremor shook the ground, stronger than before. In the distance, the column of light pulsed and expanded. We're out of time for debates, Freya declared, turning toward the disturbance. That's a dimensional fracture growing unstable. If it collapses completely, this entire region could be pulled into the void between realms. Can we stop it? Issei asked urgently. We cannot, Amaterasu replied. But perhaps you can. Issei stared at her in disbelief. Me, I don't even know what I'm doing. How am I supposed to fix a dimensional whatever? The Supreme Dragon system exists outside conventional dimensional laws, Amaterasu explained. In theory, you should be able to influence dimensional boundaries directly. In theory, Issei repeated incredulously. No one has witnessed the system in action for millennia, Freya said with a shrug. But if you don't try, thousands die, including your precious friends. Put that way, Issei realized he had no choice. He looked down at the transformed boosted gear, its prismatic surface shifting with colors he couldn't name. "Didrag," he said quietly. "How do I do this?" "Focus on the fracture. The system will recognize the dimensional instability. Let it guide your actions." Issei nodded and stepped forward, extending his gauntlet hand toward the distant pillar of light. He closed his eyes, focusing his awareness as Didrag suggested. Immediately, his perception expanded again. He could feel the fracture like an open wound in reality. Bleeding energy in dangerous patterns. Without conscious thought, mathematical equations and dimensional coordinates flooded his mind. He understood the exact nature of the problem. The Su-Den surge of the Supreme Dragon System's awakening had temporarily weakened the boundary between Earth, Midgard, his mind supplied automatically, and the void between dimensions. Issei extended his transformed arm, and power flowed through him, different from his usual demonic energy or even Didrag's power. This was something primal, something that felt older than the Pantheons themselves. The gauntlet pulsed, and Issei felt himself instinctively weaving that energy into a complex pattern that matched the fracture's dimensional frequency. "That's impossible," he heard Freya whisper behind him. "He's actually doing it. The system truly awakens," Amaterasu murmured in response. After all this time, Issei barely registered their words. His entire being was focused on the task, guided by knowledge he didn't consciously possess. With a final surge of effort, he closed his hand into a fist, and the distant pillar of light collapsed in on itself, the dimensional tear sealing shut with a thunderclap that echoed across the city. The expanded awareness receded gradually, leaving Issei standing in the clearing, breathing heavily. His legs trembled with sudden exhaustion, and he sank to one knee. "That was intense," he managed, his voice hoarse. Freya approached cautiously, her expression a mix of wariness and newfound respect. "You sealed a Class 3 dimensional fracture. Without training. On instinct." She shook her head in disbelief. The reports to Asgard were not exaggerated. Amaterasu joined them, her movements still perfectly controlled despite the tension of the situation. "This one believes we must reconsider our approach. Issei Hyodo cannot simply be claimed by any single pantheon. His awakening has implications for all realms." "For once, we agree," Freya conceded reluctantly. "But he needs protection and training. The Void cultists were just the first. Every faction with an interest in dimensional politics will be hunting him now." Before anyone could respond, the air several meters away shimmered and tore open, revealing a portal unlike the previous ones. This opening gleamed like polished obsidian, its edges perfectly formed. Through it stepped a woman whose dark skin contrasted with elaborate golden jewelry and flowing white linen robes. Her eyes were lined with kohl in the ancient Egyptian style, and a staff topped with Ankh symbol rested in her right hand. "The Egyptians," Freya muttered. "Wonderful." The vultures circled quickly. The newcomer smiled thinly at Freya's words. "Charming as always, daughter of Asgard." Her gaze swept over Amaterasu with respectful acknowledgement before settling on Issei with intense interest. "So this is the vessel. Fascinating." "Vessel," Issei repeated, disliking the term immediately. The woman inclined her head slightly. "A poor choice of words, perhaps. I am Isis Nephthali, representative of the Egyptian pantheon. And you, Issei Hyodo, have become the most interesting being in several millennia." "This is getting ridiculous," Issei said, struggling back to his feet. "How does everyone know my name? And why is every pantheon suddenly showing up in the middle of nowhere, Japan?" "Your awakening resonated across all dimensional planes," Isis explained. "As for your location," she gestured to their surroundings, "this is hardly nowhere. This region sits at a confluence of ley lines that connect to multiple pantheons, territories. Why do you think so many supernatural factions have interests in this area?" Issei frowned, thinking of Kuo Academy and its devil population. "I thought it was coincidence." Amaterasu made a small sound that might have been disapproval. "There are no coincidences in matters of cosmic significance. Your presence here, your connection to the devil faction, even your initial awakening as the Red Dragon Emperor, all part of greater patterns. Patterns that have been accelerated by today's events," Isis added. "The Council of 12 has convened an emergency session. Representatives from all major pantheons are being summoned. The Council of 12. Issei looked to Didrag mentally for explanation. An inter-pantheon governing body. They handle disputes and threats that cross mythological boundaries. They haven't convened a full emergency session in over 3 centuries. They want me to attend, don't they? Issei guessed. You misunderstand, Isis replied. Her voice carefully neutral. You are not being invited to attend. You are the subject of the emergency session. They are deciding how to respond to your existence. That sounds ominous, Issei said. It should, Freya confirmed bluntly. The last time the council convened an emergency session about a single entity, they decided to bind Fenrir with unbreakable chains and imprison him in the depths of Niflheim. Issei swallowed hard. And if they decide I'm a threat? None of the 3 women answered immediately, their silence more telling than words. This one believes such an outcome is preventable, Amaterasu finally said. With proper representation and demonstration of control. Control I don't have yet, Issei pointed out. A problem that can be addressed, Isis said, tapping her staff thoughtfully against the ground. What you need is a neutral territory where you can learn to master these abilities without political interference. Such a place doesn't exist. Freya argued. Every inch of every dimension is claimed by some faction or another. Not quite, Isis countered with a mysterious smile. There is one location specifically designed for cross-pantheon interaction. The Nexus Library. Amaterasu's eyes widened slightly. You would suggest the library. That is, unprecedented. As is his awakening, Isis replied. Exceptional circumstances require exceptional measures. Issei looked between them, confused. What's the Nexus Library? A neutral repository of knowledge from all pantheons, Isis explained. Quote, created after the Great Pantheon War as a place where representatives from different mythologies could study and exchange information without political constraints. It exists in a pocket dimension specifically constructed to be neutral territory. And you think they'd let me stay there? Issei asked skeptically. With proper sponsorship, Isis confirmed, glancing at her fellow representatives. If representatives from multiple pantheons were to jointly request sanctuary status for you, the library's custodian would be obligated to consider it. Freya crossed her arms, considering. It's not the worst idea. The library has protections against external interference that even the council would hesitate to violate. The Japanese pantheon would support such a petition, Amaterasu said after a moment of contemplation. As would Egypt, Isis added. Freya sighed heavily. Odin will have my head, but I'll convince Asgard to agree as well. 3 pantheons should be sufficient to secure temporary sanctuary. Issei's head spun with the rapid developments. Just hours ago, his biggest concern had been finishing his homework and maybe training with his sacred gear. Now he was standing in a destroyed forest clearing with representatives from 3 different mythological pantheons, discussing interdimensional politics and sanctuary in a magical library. Don't I get a say in this? He asked. All 3 women turned to him with varying expressions of surprise, as if the concept of his input hadn't occurred to them. Of course, Amaterasu said after an awkward pause. This one will not wish to impose a path upon you without consent. Issei took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. Look, I understand that this is apparently a huge deal. But I have a life here. Friends, family, school. I can't just disappear to some interdimensional library. Your attachments are understandable, Isis said, her voice gentler than before. But you must recognize the reality of your situation. The void cultists who attacked you today were merely the first. Others will come. Some seeking to control you, others to destroy you before you can fully manifest your powers. And they won't care about collateral damage. Freya added bluntly. Those friends and family you're worried about. They'll be the first targets if you stay here unprotected. The truth of their words hit Issei like a physical blow. He thought of his parents, blissfully unaware of the supernatural world. Of Asia, Rias, and the others in the occult research club. If staying put them in danger. How long? He asked finally. How long would I need to stay at this library? Until you achieve sufficient mastery of the Supreme Dragon system to protect yourself and others, Amaterasu replied. This one cannot predict the exact duration. And I could come back. Visit my friends, check on my family. The 3 representatives exchanged glances. Controlled visits might be arranged, Isis said carefully. With proper precautions. It wasn't the answer Issei wanted, but it was better than nothing. He looked down at the transformed boosted gear, its surface still shifting with prismatic light. The power it contained had saved him today, but he had accessed it purely by instinct. Without training, without understanding, he was as much a danger as those who sought to control him. Okay, he said finally. I'll go to the Nexus library. But I need to talk to my friends first, explain what's happening. A reasonable request, Amaterasu acknowledged. This one will ensure your devil companions are informed of the situation. Freya checked a runic timepiece on her wrist. We need to move quickly. The council will be convening within hours, and we need to establish your sanctuary status before they reach any binding decisions. As if to emphasize her point, a distant rumble shook the ground again, fainter than before, but a reminder of the dimensional instability Issei's awakening had triggered. Very well, Isis said. Raising her staff, I will open a path to the Nexus library and present our petition to the custodian. The ankh at the top of her staff began to glow with golden light. Prepare yourself, Issei Hyodo. You are about to enter a world few humans have ever seen. As Isis traced complex patterns in the air, opening a portal of swirling golden energy, Issei felt a strange calm settle over him. Despite the chaos of the past hour, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, something deep within him, perhaps the newly awakened system itself, whispered that this was right. That this was the path he was meant to walk. Ready? Freya asked, her hand resting casually on her spear. No, Issei replied honestly. But I'll go anyway. The portal stabilized, revealing a glimpse of massive bookshelves stretching impossibly high, illuminated by light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Nexus awaits, Isis said, gesturing toward the opening. Issei took a deep breath and stepped forward, crossing the threshold between worlds, his transformed boosted gear pulsing with anticipation. Behind him, the three representatives of ancient Pantheons followed, their presence a reminder of just how drastically his life had changed. As the portal closed behind them, erasing the destroyed clearing from view, Issei couldn't help wondering if he would ever see his home the same way again. The Nexus library defied human comprehension. Bookshelves stretched upward for what seemed like eternity, their tops lost in a perpetual golden mist. Walkways of polished stone spiraled between the shelves, connecting floating platforms where beings of various mythologies studied ancient texts. The air hummed with quiet energy, like the background radiation of countless magical systems coexisting in delicate balance. Incredible, Issei breathed, turning slowly to take in the impossible architecture. The library exists outside conventional space-time, Isis explained, her voice automatically lowering to match the hushed atmosphere. It contains knowledge from every pantheon, every mythological system that has ever existed. Some sections are restricted, of course, Freya added, pointing to areas cordoned off with barriers of shimmering energy. Knowledge too dangerous to be freely accessed. Amaterasu moved with perfect composure, as if the dimensional transition hadn't affected her in the slightest. The custodian will have sensed our arrival. This one suggests we proceed directly. As they walked, Issei noticed other beings watching them with undisguised interest. Some appeared human, others decidedly not. A woman with skin like polished emerald studied him through multifaceted eyes. A being composed entirely of shifting shadows tracked their progress while pretending to read. Two identical twins with golden hair whispered to each other, their gazes fixed on Issei's transformed boosted gear. Word travels quickly in the Nexus, Isis noted. Following Issei's gaze, news of the Supreme Dragon System's awakening has already spread. Great, Issei muttered. More attention. They approached a circular desk at Wa. Chi appeared to be the center of the library, though in this impossible space, concepts like center felt arbitrary. Behind the desk stood a figure that shifted subtly as Issei watched, never quite settling on a single appearance. One moment it appeared as an elderly man with a scholar's robes, the next a young woman with eyes full of stars, then something inhuman yet strangely familiar. The custodian, Amaterasu explained quietly. This one suggests allowing us to speak first. The shifting figure inclined what was currently ahead toward them as they approached. When it spoke, its voice resonated with multiple tones, as if several beings were speaking in perfect harmony. Representatives of Asgard, Egypt, and the Shinto pantheon, the custodian acknowledged. An unusual combination of visitors. Its gaze settled on Issei. And for a moment its form stabilized into something draconic before shifting again. And you bring the awakened one. How? Unprecedented. Isis stepped forward, her staff tapping lightly against the marble floor. Honored custodian, we come seeking sanctuary for Issei Hyodo, in whom the supreme dragon system has awakened. Sanctuary, the custodian repeated. Its tone neutral but somehow weighted with significance. The Nexus has not granted sanctuary to an individual in over 2,000 years. The circumstances warrant exception, Freya argued. Quote, the Council of 12 has convened to determine his fate. Until he can master his abilities, he requires neutral territory. The custodian's form shifted again, becoming briefly reptilian before settling into the appearance of an ageless scholar. And you three Pantheons stand as his sponsors. Are you prepared to accept the responsibilities such sponsorship entails? This one accepts responsibility on behalf of the Japanese Pantheon. Amaterasu said formally. Egypt acknowledges the duty and accepts, Isis added. Freya hesitated for a fraction of a second. Asgard stands as sponsor and accepts the consequences. The custodian considered for a moment, its form rippling like water. Very well. Temporary sanctuary is granted, with conditions. It turned its attention fully to Issei. Issei Hyodo, vessel of the supreme dragon system. Do you understand what has awakened within you? Put on the spot, Issei glanced uncertainly at the three representatives before answering honestly. No, I don't. I thought I just had Ddraig, the Red Dragon Emperor. All this supreme dragon system stuff is new to me. The custodian's expression might have been amusement or concern, it was difficult to tell on a face that never quite remained constant. Honesty. Refreshing. It gestured, and a book materialized from nowhere, floating in the air before Issei. The simplest explanation is this: what you call Ddraig is merely one aspect of a greater draconic entity. The supreme dragon system is the original source from which all dragon types across all pantheons emerged. The floating book opened, its pages filling with moving illustrations depicting a cosmic dragon dividing into countless smaller entities, each flowing into different realities. In the beginning, the custodian continued, there was one dragon, existing before the pantheons formed. As creation expanded and different mythological systems emerged, aspects of this primal dragon were incorporated into each, becoming the various dragons known in human myths. Ddraig, Albion, Fafnir, Tiamat, Yulong, Nidhogg, all fragments of the original. But if that's true, Issei said, watching the illustrations with fascination, why doesn't everyone know this? Because the knowledge was deliberately suppressed, Isis explained. Each pantheon claimed their dragons as unique creations of their own mythological system. Aknal, edging a power that predated their own was, politically inconvenient. Convenient simplification, Freya added with a snort. Pantheons don't like admitting anything existed before them. The book's pages turned, showing a gathering of divine beings performing some kind of ritual around a colossal dragon. Eventually, the complete system became too powerful to exist freely, the custodian said. The combined pantheons agreed to seal it away, fragmenting its consciousness across multiple vessels through time. The sacred gears known as divine dividing and boosted gear were just two of many repositories created to contain aspects of the greater whole. But something changed, Issei guessed, thinking of the strange armor that had formed around him during the fight. The seal broke somehow. Not broken, the custodian corrected, evolved. Each vessel of a dragon fragment carried a seed of the complete system. In theory, under the right circumstances, that seed could germinate and reconnect with the greater whole. It appears you are the first to achieve this reconnection. But I didn't do anything special, Issei protested. Perhaps that is precisely why it occurred, Amaterasu suggested. This one observes that previous vessels often sought power deliberately. Your acceptance of Ddraig appears to have been more harmonious. The custodian nodded, its form briefly talking on aspects of every pantheon representative present before settling again. The supreme dragon system requires balance, not domination or submission, but partnership. Your natural affinity for cooperation may have been the catalyst. The book closed and vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The custodian gestured again, and a key materialized in its hand, a key that seemed to be composed of the same prismatic material as Issei's transformed boosted gear. Sanctuary comes with responsibility, the custodian said, offering the key to Issei. This will guide you to quarters prepared for your use. You will have access to the general collections and training areas. The representatives of your sponsoring Pantheons may visit to provide instruction. Issei took the key carefully. It felt warm in his hand, pulsing in time with the gauntlet on his arm. How long will I need to stay here? He asked. Until mastery or catastrophe, the custodian replied enigmatically. The Supreme Dragon system does not awaken without purpose. Events have been set in motion that cannot be undone. Great, Issei muttered. Cryptic prophecies. Just what I needed. The custodian's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. Rest assured, Issei Hyodo, that while you are within the Nexus, you are protected from direct interference. The Council of 12 cannot extract you from here without violating ancient covenants. And what about my friends? My family? Issei pressed. I can't just disappear without explanation. Arrangements will be made, Isis assured him. Time passes differently here than in your home realm. What may feel like weeks of study might translate to only days in your world. This one will personally ensure your devil companions understand the circumstances, Amaterasu added. They will be informed of your safety and the necessity of your absence. Issei didn't find this entirely reassuring, but he nodded anyway. The transformed boosted gear pulsed on his arm, as if responding to his concerns. We have little choice, partner, Diedrag's voice rumbled in his mind. The library is indeed the safest place until you gain control. The knowledge here will be invaluable. The custodian's attention shifted suddenly, its form becoming more alert. The library acknowledges the arrival of another seeking the awakened one. A new portal was forming several meters away, this one a swirling vortex of crimson and gold energy unlike the previous entrances. Through it stepped a woman of extraordinary beauty, her skin the rich brown of fertile earth, her eyes holding the depth of ancient wisdom. She wore flowing garments of red and gold silk that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, and jewels adorned her neck, wrists and ankles. When she moved, she carried herself with a grace that somehow combined royal dignity with approachable warmth. Lakshmi, Isis said, surprise evident in her voice. The Hindu pantheon joins us as well. The Nooch, Omer inclined her head in acknowledgement. News travels quickly between realms, especially news of this magnitude. Her gaze settled on Issei with undisguised interest. So this is the vessel in whom the Supreme Dragon system has awakened. Quote, not vessel, Issei corrected firmly, growing tired of the term. My name is Issei Hyodo. Rather than taking offense, Lakshmi's expression softened with approval. Well spoken, Issei Hyodo. Identity matters, particularly when cosmic forces seek to overwhelm it. She turned her attention to the custodian. I come to add the Hindu Pantheon's sponsorship to the sanctuary petition. The custodian's form shifted into something vaguely reminiscent of Hindu iconography before returning to its scholarly appearance. 4 pantheons now stand as sponsors. The petition is strengthened accordingly. Freya eyed the newcomer suspiciously. Why would the Hindu pantheon involve themselves? You've remained neutral in interdimensional politics for centuries. Neutrality is a luxury we can no longer afford, Lakshmi replied. The awakening of the Supreme Dragon system coincides with ancient prophecies from our tradition. The time of convergence approaches. Convergence, Issei repeated, remembering the word from his attackers. The void cultists mentioned that too. What does it mean? An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Even the custodian's ever-shifting form seemed to still momentarily. The Great Convergence, Isis finally said, her voice uncharacteristically solemn, is a prophesied event in which the boundaries between all realms and pantheons will destabilize. Quote, destabilize is a gentle word for cosmic catastrophe, Freya added bluntly. Every dimensional barrier breaking down simultaneously, every pantheon's territory bleeding into others. Every supernatural force suddenly unbound by its traditional constraints. Chaos, Amaterasu concluded simply. This one believes the human concept of apocalypse approximates the scale, if not the precise nature. Quote, Issei stared at them in disbelief. And my awakening is connected to this. It may be response rather than cause, Lakshmi suggested. The Supreme Dragon system existed before the pantheons. It may have awakened precisely because the convergence approaches, a cosmic immune response to coming disorder. Or it could trigger the very catastrophe we fear, Isis countered. Which is why you must learn control quickly, Issei Hyodo. The power you now contain could either stabilize the coming convergence or accelerate it beyond recovery. The weight of responsibility settled on Issei's shoulders like a physical burden. He looked down at the transformed boosted gear, seeing it in a new light, not just as a weapon or tool, but as something fundamental to the structure of reality itself. So no pressure, he said with a weak attempt at humor. Just master an ancient cosmic power and maybe prevent the apocalypse. Should be easy. To his surprise, Lakshmi laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to lighten the atmosphere. I begin to see why the system chose you, Issei Hyodo. Humor in the face of cosmic responsibility is a rare and valuable trait. Before Issei could respond, a tremor ran through the library, subtle but unmistakable. Books rattled on shelves, and the golden mist above them swirled in disturbed patterns. The council convenes, the custodian announced. Their deliberations create ripples even here. Then our timing was fortunate, Isis observed. Had we delayed even slightly, this one believes we should allow Issei Hyodo to settle into his sanctuary, Amaterasu suggested. The journey has been eventful. Issei couldn't argue with that assessment. His body still ached from the initial attack, and his mind felt stretched to its limits trying to absorb everything he'd learned. Yeah, I could use some time to process, he admitted. The custodian gestured, and the key in Issei's hand glowed brighter. The key will guide you to your quarters. Rest. Tomorrow, your training will begin. As if responding to the custodian's words, the key tugged gently in Issei's grip, pulling him toward one of the spiral staircases. We will return tomorrow to begin instruction, Isis assured him. Each of us has knowledge to offer regarding different aspects of the system. This one will bring materials regarding the Eastern Dragon manifestations. Amaterasu added with a formal bow. I'll handle combat training, Freya said, her hand resting casually on her spear. You need to learn how to fight with Yo. Earn new abilities without destroying everything around you. And I will teach you about balance and harmony, Lakshmi concluded. The system's greatest power lies not in destruction but in integration. Issei nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. Thank you, all of you. I'm still not sure why the system chose me, but I'll do my best to learn quickly. As he turned to follow the key's gentle pull, the custodian's voice stopped him. Issei Hyodo. One final thing. The shifting figure regarded him with eyes that momentarily resembled Deedrake's. While you are here, be cautious whom you trust. Not all who seek knowledge of the Supreme Dragon system have benevolent intentions. With that cryptic warning, the custodian returned to its duties, leaving Issei to ponder its words as he followed the key's guidance up the spiral staircase and into his new, temporary home. The quarters provided by the Nexus Library defied conventional architecture. The space existed in what appeared to be a pocket dimension branching off from the main library, a self-contained apartment that somehow combined elements from every culture represented by his sponsors. Japanese minimalism blended with Norse runic patterns. Egyptian hieroglyphics decorated walls alongside Hindu mandalas, all coexisting in perfect harmony. As Issei explored the space, finding a bedroom, study area, meditation room, and training dojo, he felt the day's events finally catching up with him. The transformed boosted gear receded gradually, flowing back into his body until only a small prismatic gem remained embedded in the back of his left hand, a visual reminder of the change he couldn't undo. Deedrake, he said aloud in the privacy of his quarters. Are you still there? I am here, partner, the dragon's voice replied, somehow both familiar and different. Though, DDRAIG, is now only part of what I am. As you are only part of what you will become. That's not ominous at all, Issei muttered, sinking onto a bed that adjusted perfectly to his body. What happens now? Do I just disappear from my life? Learn to be some cosmic dragon god instead of a high school student? The path is not predetermined. Supreme Dragon system does not erase what you are, it expands it. How you integrate this power remains your choice. Issei stared at the ceiling, which somehow displayed a perfect recreation of the night sky above Kuo. Some choice. Stay here and learn control, or go home and potentially trigger an apocalypse. Perhaps the first lesson you must learn is that cosmic power and normal life are not mutually exclusive. Balance is possible, difficult, but possible. As sleep began to claim him, Issei's thoughts drifted to his friends, to Rias and the others. What would they think of his transformation? Would they even recognize what he was becoming? The last thing he saw before consciousness faded was the prismatic gem on his hand pulsing gently, its light containing all the colors of creation, and perhaps, if he learned to control it, the key to preserving everything he cared about. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Valkyrie's Challenge. Frost crackled under Issei's boots as he crossed the training arena. The air hung so cold that each breath materialized as dense white clouds, lingering longer than seemed natural. Above, an artificial sky projected a perfect recreation of Asgardian constellations, stars unlike any visible from Earth forming patterns that simultaneously felt alien and strangely familiar to him. "You're late," Freya announced, her voice echoing across the chamber. She stood at the arena's center, spear planted beside her, platinum hair pulled back in a complex pattern of braids that seemed both practical for combat and oddly beautiful. Unlike yesterday's formal armor, she wore a close-fitting training outfit reinforced with leather panels etched with runes that occasionally flickered with suppressed power. "Sorry," Issei replied, rubbing his hands together against the biting cold. "I got lost 3 times. This place doesn't exactly follow normal spatial rules." Freya's mouth quirked slightly. "The Nexus adapts to its inhabitants. It's testing your spatial awareness." She gestured around them. "Notice how it's configured this training space. Your mind may not recognize it consciously, but the Supreme Dragon system within you does." Issei glanced around, noticing for the first time that the arena wasn't merely a featureless space. The floor featured subtle circular patterns reminiscent of the world tree he'd glimpsed in one of the library's texts. The walls contained recessed alcoves housing weapons of various designs, most unfamiliar. "It looks Norse," he ventured. "Skiblanir," Freya corrected. "The pocket dimension where Odin once trained young dragons to serve in Asgard's defense." She approached, scrutinizing him with those piercing ice-blue eyes. "The system remembers places even you've never seen." 3 days had passed since Issei's arrival at the Nexus Library, 3 days of overwhelming information as each of his 4 sponsors introduced different aspects of his awakening power. Amaterasu had guided him through meditation techniques. Isis had explained the historical connections between dragons and various pantheons, and Lakshmi had helped him understand the concept of dimensional resonance. But this was his first training session with Freya, and something told him it would be significantly more hands-on. "Impressive recreation," Issei said, trying to mask his nervousness. "Does it come with impressive heating?" Freya snorted. "Cold as the first teacher. Northern dragons learned control through necessity. One errant flame in a frozen landscape meant death for their entire clutch." She circled him slowly, assessing his stance with critical precision. Without warning, she swept his legs from under him. Issei hit the frost-covered ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. "Lesson 1, Freya announced, standing over him. "The Supreme Dragon system grants you tremendous power, but it's worthless if your physical form can't channel it properly." Issei rolled to his feet with surprising agility, his body responding with reflexes he hadn't consciously developed. "I thought we'd start with, I don't know, a warm-up or something." "This is the warm-up." Freya's smile held no warmth. "The Norse aspects of your power respond to challenge, to pressure. They don't awaken through gentle coaxing." She moved again, faster this time, her spear materializing in her hand as she thrust it toward his chest. Issei sidestepped instinctively, his left hand rising as the prismatic gem embedded there pulsed with sudden light. "Good," Freya approved, not slowing her attack. "The system recognizes threat. Now channel it. Don't let it control you." Easier said than done. As Freya pressed her attack with inhuman speed, Issei felt power surging through him chaotically. The gem in his hand blazed, and frost began forming along his arm, not from the environment but emanating from within him. "Focus," Freya barked as her spear sliced a thin line across his cheek. "The frost dragon aspect responds to your emotions. Direct it, shape it." Issei gritted his teeth, trying to concentrate as he evaded increasingly dangerous strikes. The frost continued spreading up his arm, crystallizing into scales that gleamed with prismatic light. His breath came faster, each exhalation now producing not just vapor but actual particles of ice that hung suspended around him. That's it, Freya encouraged, her attacks becoming even more precise. Feel the connection to Nihagir's lineage within you. To what? Issei gasped, narrowly avoiding a thrust that would have skewered a normal human. Nihagir, the great dragon that gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil. Freya spun her spear in a complex pattern, forcing Issei to retreat. His essence flows within the system, the aspect of preservation through destruction. Of cold that burns as fiercely as flame. As if triggered by her words, Issei felt something ancient stir within his consciousness, a presence distinct from Diedrag, older and somehow more primal. His vision sharpened suddenly, the world around him slowing as his perception accelerated. He could see the minute shifts in Freya's weight before each attack, could anticipate the arc of her spear before she committed to the movement. The frost scales spread further, now covering his entire left arm and beginning to form across his chest. When Freya's next attack came, a faint follow, wed by a vicious reverse thrust, Issei didn't merely evade. He moved with deliberate precision, his frost-covered hand closing around the spear's shaft. Where he touched it, the weapon instantly frosted over. Freya's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise he'd seen on her face. You're adapting faster than expected. Issei smiled, newfound confidence flowing through him along with the cold power. Maybe I'm a better student than you thought. Perhaps. Freya released her spear, stepping back with newfound respect in her gaze. But controlling one aspect doesn't make you master of the system. With a sharp gesture, she summoned crackling energy between her palms. Norse dragons command more than ice. The bolt of energy she hurled at him would have killed a normal human instantly. Issei reacted without thinking, the scaled arm rising as instinct took over. The frost coating his limb absorbed the energy, transforming it from destructive force into swirling patterns of crystalline light that spiraled around him before dissipating harmlessly. Impressive, Freya conceded, summoning her frost-covered spear back to her hand with a gesture. The system recognizes compatible energy types and adapts. But she moved with blinding speed, suddenly inside his guard, her leg sweeping toward his head in a kick that would have removed it from his shoulders. Issei's scaled arm rose to block, but Freya's boot never connected. Instead, she halted the kick millimeters from impact, balancing perfectly on one leg. Physical training remains essential, she finished. Your reaction was correct, but slow. Your body must move as quickly as your mind can process. Issei exhaled slowly, the frost scales receding slightly as he gained better control over the surge of power. This is intense. Survival usually is. Freya lowered her leg and stepped back, studying him with clinical detachment. The void cultists who attacked you were testing your capabilities. The next attack will come from someone prepared for what you might become. She waved a hand, and the environment around them shifted. The training arena remained, but now 12 transparent figures surround them, humanoid but with features that constantly shifted like liquid mercury. Void constructs, Freya explained. Training simulations based on the creatures you encountered. Issei tensed, the frost scales automatically expanding across his torso in response to the perceived threat. They feel real. The Nexus recreates threats with perfect accuracy. Their attacks will hurt, their tactics will adapt, and yes, they could theoretically kill you if you fail completely. Freya stepped back to the edge of the arena. Defeat them. Wait, what? Issei protested. I just started. The constructs attacked simultaneously, moving with the same unnatural fluidity as the creatures that had ambushed him. Issei's objection died in his throat as survival instinct took over. The frost dragon aspect responded to his surge of adrenaline, power flowing through his transformed limbs with greater intensity. As the first construct reached him, Issei discovered that his body remembered more than his conscious mind. He moved with precision he hadn't known himself capable of, the scaled arm deflecting attacks while his normal hand struck with devastating force. Each blow he landed left frost patterns spreading across the construct's mercury surfaces. Don't just react, Freya called from the sidelines. Nihagir's aspect grants offensive capabilities. Find them. Surrounded and pressed on all sides. Issei felt frustration building. The frost continued spreading across his body, now covering his chest and beginning to extend down his right arm as well. With each heartbeat, the temperature around him dropped further, until the entire arena floor gleamed with a layer of ice that spread outward from where he stood. One construct broke through his guard, its mercury hand plunging toward his chest. Issei's frustration peaked, and something clicked into place within his mind, a connection to knowledge he hadn't consciously possessed. His hand shot forward, not to block but to attack, and from his palm erupted not fire but concentrated cold, a beam of blue-white energy that froze the construct solid instantly. Yes, Freya's voice carried satisfaction. The breath weapon manifests. Emboldened, Issei turned to face the remaining constructs. They hesitated, their fluid forms rippling with what might have been uncertainty. Issei didn't give them time to adapt. With newfound confidence, he extended both hands, channeling the cold power through them in sweeping arcs. The temperature plummeted to impossible depths, the air itself crystallizing as waves of frost energy washed over the constructs. One by one, they froze in place, their mercury forms transformed into statues of gleaming ice. Panting slightly, Issei lowered his hands, watching as the frost scales receded gradually back into the prismatic gem. The frozen constructs cracked and shattered, dissolving into motes of light that faded from existence. Not bad, Freya admitted, approaching across the now ice-covered arena. Your instincts are good, and the system responds well to your emotions. Was that really necessary? Issei asked, flexing his fingers as the last scales disappeared. Completely. Freya's tone brooked no argument. The Nexus granted you sanctuary, but that doesn't mean you're safe. The Council of 12 debates your fate even now, and not all members view your awakening favorably. She gestured, and a section of the wall shimmered, transforming into a mirror-like surface that reflected not their physical forms but swirling energies that Issei somehow recognized as representations of dimensional boundaries. The convergence approaches, Freya continued, her voice growing serious. Your awakening is either a response to this threat or its catalyst. The Council remains divided on which interpretation is correct. Quote, Issei studied the swirling energies, noticing how they pulsed in patterns that seemed increasingly erratic. These are the boundaries between pantheons. Between realities, Freya corrected. Each pantheon exists in its own dimensional space, overlapping with the human world at specific points of resonance, what you might call sacred sites, or places of power. For millennia, these boundaries have remained stable, with only occasional breaches. She pointed to areas where the energies seemed to thin and stretch dangerously. But now they weaken. Convergence prophecies speak of a time when all boundaries collapse simultaneously, when all pantheons and their territories blend into chaos. And they think I'm causing this? Issei asked, a ch. Ill that had nothing to do with frost dragons running down his spine. Some do. Freya's expression was unreadable. Others believe the supreme dragon system awakened precisely because the convergence approaches, that you represent the universe's attempt to create a stabilizing force. She turned to face him directly, and for the first time, Issei saw something vulnerable in her ice-blue eyes. Asgard stands divided on the matter. The Allfather believes you may be our salvation. Others, including my brother Thor, see you as an existential threat. Great, Issei muttered. So half of Asgard wants me dead. Not dead. Freya's mouth quirked in what might have been black humor. Bound, controlled, harnessed. Death would only release the system to find another vessel. The training arena shifted again. The ice melting away as the space reconfigured into something more comfortable. A simple gathering area with 2 chairs positioned before a hearth where blue-white flames crackled, giving off warmth without heat. Sit, Freya instructed, taking one of the chairs. There are things you need to understand about Asgard's interest in you. Issei sat cautiously, finding the chair perfectly conformed to his body. I'm guessing it's not just about preventing the apocalypse. Political power is never simple. Freya leaned forward, the firelight casting her sharp features into stark relief. Asgard has maintained superiority among the northern pantheons for millennia through force, diplomacy, and strategic marriages. But our power wanes. Why? Belief, Freya replied simply. Pantheons draw power from mortal reverence. When was the last time humans genuinely worshipped the Norse gods? Understanding dawned on Issei. So you're losing power because people don't believe anymore. But then why aren't all pantheons affected equally? Some adapted better than others. The Japanese pantheons integrated into cultural practices that continued even as explicit worship declined. The Hindu pantheons maintained active followers. Even the Egyptian and Greek systems found ways to persist through cultural memory and archaeological fascination. Freya's expression hardened. But the Norse, we became cartoon characters, comic book heroes, our sacred stories reduced to entertainment. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, and Issei found himself sympathizing despite the earlier brutality of her training methods. That's why Odin supports you, Freya continued. The supreme dragon system exists outside the economy of belief. It draws power from the fundamental draconic energies that predate pantheons entirely. By allying with you, Asgard could theoretically maintain its position regardless of declining worship. And those who oppose me, they fear why that scenario, that Odin would use you to establish absolute authority, bypassing the traditional checks on his power. Freya sighed, running a hand along one of her complex braids. My brother leads that faction. Thor believes the old ways must be preserved, that relying on external power would ultimately destroy what makes Asgard unique. Issei considered this information carefully. And where do you stand in this debate? For the first time, Freya looked genuinely uncomfortable. That's complicated. I've got time, Issei pressed, suddenly curious about the conflict he sensed within her. Freya studied him for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke in a voice lower and more personal than he'd heard from her before. I stand for Asgard's survival, but not at the cost of its soul. Her fingers traced one of the runes embedded in her armor. I was raised as a Valkyrie, a chooser of the slain, a warrior maiden who determines which heroes are worthy of Valhalla. We serve Asgard, but our first loyalty is to worthiness itself. And that puts you at odds with both factions, Issei guessed. Perceptive, Freya acknowledged with a slight nod. Odin would use you as a source of power without concern for whether such usage is worthy of Asgard's legacy. Thor would reject you regardless of the cost to our realm's survival, clinging to traditions that may no longer serve us. She leaned forward, her gaze intensely focused. That's why I volunteered to be your instructor. I need to determine for myself whether the supreme dragon system, and its vessel, are worthy of Asgard's allegiance. The honesty of her admission caught Issei off guard. He had assumed all four of his sponsors had purely political motives, but Freya's explanation revealed a more complex truth. She wasn't merely following orders or pursuing advantage, she was genuinely seeking to make the right choice for her people. That's why you're so hard on me during training, he realized. Exactly. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Worthiness cannot be determined through gentle questions or diplomatic niceties. It reveals itself under pressure, in moments of crisis and choice. Before Issei could respond, the air between them shimmered, and a raven materialized, larger than any natural bird, its feathers gleaming with an iridescence that reminded Issei of his transformed boosted gear. Hugin, Freya acknowledged, her posture straightening immediately. What news from the Allfather? The raven cocked its head, regarding her with an intelligence far beyond that of a normal animal. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, entirely unlike what should have emerged from an avian throat. Freya Valkyrdottir, your presence is required in Asgard. The Council of 12 has requested testimony regarding the dragon vessel. Testimony. Freya frowned. They cannot compel me while I serve as sponsor to one granted Nexus Sanctuary. They do not compel, the raven replied. They invite, but the Allfather suggests compliance would be politically advantageous. Issei watched the exchange with fascination, noting how Freya's entire demeanor shifted from instructor to political player in an instant. Very well, she said after a moment's consideration. Inform the Allfather I will attend, but only for the duration of my testimony. My responsibilities here take precedence. The raven inclined its head in acknowledgement before dissolving into motes of light that swirled briefly before vanishing. Freya stood, her expression troubled. This complicates matters. The council rarely requests direct testimony unless they're approaching a decision. Is that bad? Issei asked, rising as well. It depends on what they're deciding. Freya paced the small area, her movements betraying uncharacteristic agitation. If they're simply establishing protocols for monitoring your development, that's manageable. If they're considering more restrictive measures. She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. Issei remembered her earlier words about binding and controlling the Supreme Dragon system. Could they force me to leave the Nexus? He asked. Not without violating ancient covenants, Freya replied. But they could place such onerous conditions on your sanctuary that remaining here becomes untenable. She stopped pacing abruptly, coming to some internal decision. You need to accelerate your training. Not just the Norse aspects, but all of them. If the Council is moving toward action, you need to demonstrate sufficient control to alleviate their concerns. I've only been here 3 days, Issei protested. Then we'll have to make today count. Freya's voice regained its commanding tone. The training arena will adapt to increase intensity. I want you to manifest the Frost Dragon aspect fully before I return from Asgard. The space around them shifted again, returning to the frigid training arena, but with notable differences. The temperature dropped even further, and the circular patterns on the floor now glowed with runes that pulsed in complex sequences. These are awakening catalysts, Freya explained, gesturing to the runes. They'll stimulate the Nihagr aspect within the system, making it easier to access but harder to control. That sounds dangerous, Issei observed. Extremely, Freya agreed without hesitation. But we're beyond safe methods now. The Council won't be impressed by incremental progress. She approached him, and to Issei's surprise, placed her hands on his shoulders. Despite her earlier brutality in training, her touch was firm but not harsh. Listen carefully, she said, her voice lowered as if sharing a secret. What I'm about to tell you goes against my instructions from Asgard. But I believe you deserve to know. Issei met her gaze, suddenly aware of how close she stood. The convergence isn't merely some distant cosmic event, Freya continued. According to our seers, the first major boundary collapse will occur within months, not years. And the focal point of that collapse? Let me guess, Issei said grimly. Huo, my home. Freya nodded. The very place where you awakened. Whether that's coincidence or causation remains debated, but the fact remains, the people you care about are directly in the path of what's coming. The implications hit Issei like a physical blow. Then I need to go back, warn them. And accomplish what? Freya interrupted. In your current state, you'd only accelerate the collapse through your presence. The system within you resonates with dimensional boundaries, that's why the Nexus was necessary in the first place. She released his shoulders, stepping back. The only way you help them is by mastering your abilities here, quickly. So you can return with control rather than chaos. The prismatic gem in Issei's hand pulsed in response to his emotions, frost beginning to form around it once more. Then let's not waste time, he said, determination hardening his voice. Show me what I need to do. For the briefest moment, Freya's carefully controlled expression softened into something like approval. That's the spirit of a true dragon. She gestured to the glowing runes. Center yourself in the primary circle. I'll activate the catalysts before I depart. Issei moved to the indicated position. Feeling the runes, energy prickling against his skin even before activation. Freya circled the perimeter, touching specific points in a precise sequence. Each touch caused the corresponding rune to flare brighter, until the entire pattern pulsed with rhythmic energy. These will guide your manifestation, Freya explained, completing the circuit. Follow the energy patterns. Let the system respond naturally. Don't fight the transformations, but don't surrender to them either. She paused at the edge of the arena. I'll return as soon as possible. If something goes wrong, if you lose control completely, the Nexus will intervene. That's comforting, Issei muttered. Freya's mouth quirked in that not quite smile he was beginning to recognize. One last thing. She reached into a dimensional pocket and withdrew a small object, a pendant made of what appeared to be a dragon's tooth, suspended on a leather cord. Wear this. It's connected to me through old magic. If true danger threatens, it will alert me regardless of where I am. She tossed it to him, and Issei caught it reflexively. The tooth felt surprisingly warm against his palm, almost alive. Thank you, he said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Freya shrugged, already turning to leave. Don't sentimentalize it. You're no use to anyone dead. With those decidedly unsentimental words, she departed, leaving Issei alone in the increasingly active runic circle. The moment the door sealed behind her, the runes flared painfully bright, and Issei felt power surge through him with far greater intensity than during their training session. The frost scales erupted across his arm without conscious effort, spreading rapidly across his chest and down his other limbs. The temperature around him plummeted so severely that the air itself began to crystallize, forming intricate patterns that hung suspended around him. "Okay," Issei muttered through chattering teeth. "Follow the patterns. Don't fight. Don't surrender. Easy." It was anything but easy. The Norse draconic aspect responded to the catalysts with almost desperate eagerness, as if it had been caged for centuries and now sensed freedom. Issei's consciousness expanded again, but differently than before, this time stretching not outward to other dragons but backward through time, connecting him to memories that weren't his own. He saw Nihagr at the roots of Yggdrasil, massive beyond comprehension, gnawing at the foundations of reality itself. He witnessed battles between frost dragons and fire giants, conflicts that shaped mountain ranges and carved valleys. He experienced the creation of the first Valkyries, women infused with draconic essence to make them worthy of choosing the worthy. And through it all, a hunger for freedom that threatened to overwhelm his human identity entirely. "No," Issei gasped, forcing himself to remember who he was. "I control this, not the other way around." The frost continued spreading, now covering his entire body. His vision shifted, colors inverting as his eyes transformed to see heat patterns rather than light. His fingers elongated, nails hardening into crystalline claws that could shear through steel. For a terrifying moment, Issei felt his human consciousness slipping, submerged beneath the ancient draconic will that surged through him. The runic catalysts pulsed faster, pushing him toward complete transformation. The pendant against his chest warmed suddenly, the dragon tooth seeming to pulse with a rhythm that countered the runes. Issei seized on that sensation, using it as an anchor to his own identity. "I am Issei Hyodo," he said aloud, his voice distorted by the partial transformation of his throat. "I contain the supreme dragon system, but it doesn't contain me." The scales continued spreading, but now under his direction rather than automatic response. Issei felt his back muscles shifting, pressure building beneath his shoulder blades as dormant structures began to form. Wings. The aspect was trying to manifest wings. Issei gritted his teeth that had sharpened into draconic fangs, and focused on controlling the transformation. Not stopping it, but directing it, shaping it to his will rather than ancient instinct. The pressure built to almost unbearable levels before finally releasing in a rush of power. From his back extended wings of crystalline frost, translucent and impossibly delicate in appearance yet radiating power that distorted the air around them. Fully transformed but still conscious of his human identity, Issei raised his clawed hands before his face. Examining the perfect scales that now covered them, he could feel the tremendous power flowing through his transformed body, power that could freeze oceans or shatter mountains if released without control. Balance, he reminded himself, recalling Lakshmi's teachings. Integration, not domination. The runic catalysts responded to his control, their pulsing slowing to match his heartbeat. The wild surge of power stabilized, becoming a steady flow rather than a chaotic torrent. Issei extended his wings experimentally, feeling how naturally they responded to his thoughts. He pushed off from the ground gently, and immediately rose several meters, the wings carrying his transformed body with effortless grace. "This is incredible," he breathed, watching as his exhaled breath formed complex fractal patterns of ice in the air. For the next several hours, Issei practiced maintaining the transformation while performing increasingly complex maneuvers, flying in intricate patterns. Manipulating frost energy to create structures of varying complexity, even engaging with training constructs that the Nexus provided. By the time exhaustion began to set in, Issei had achieved something remarkable, complete manifestation of the Norse draconic aspect while maintaining his human consciousness and control. When he finally allowed the transformation to recede, the scales flowing back into his skin and the wings dissolving into motes of crystalline light, the runic catalysts dimmed to a satisfied glow. Drained but exhilarated, Issei sank to the floor of the training arena. The pendant around his neck had cooled, returning to normal temperature now that the crisis of control had passed. "I did it, Diedrag," he murmured, wondering if the original dragon Khonsi Usness could still hear him beneath the expanded system. You did, partner, came the familiar voice, though now layered with additional resonances. The Nihauger aspect acknowledges your worthiness. Worthiness, Issei repeated, thinking of Freya's words. That seems to be the theme around here. Each pantheon has its criteria. For the Norse, worthiness is central to their concept of power. You have proven yourself by their standards. Issei was about to respond when the arena door opened, admitting not Freya but Amaterasu. The Japanese sun goddess entered with her characteristic perfect composure, though her eyes widened slightly at the frost-covered training space. This one perceived significant progress, she observed, approaching with measured steps that somehow avoided disturbing the frost patterns on the floor. The Norse aspect has acknowledged you. Freya had to go to Asgard, Issei explained, struggling to his feet. The council requested her testimony. This one is aware, Amaterasu replied. It is why this one has come. The situation develops rapidly, and not favorably. Issei's momentary satisfaction evaporated. What's happening? The council approached consensus on classification of the Supreme Dragon system as a Class 1 interdimensional threat. Amaterasu's formal language couldn't disguise the gravity of her words. Such classification would permit extraordinary measures, potentially including forcible extraction. Extraction. They can't just take the system from me, can they? Not without killing you, Amaterasu confirmed. Which own factions now advocate as acceptable collateral damage. Issei felt cold again, but not from Frost Dragon energy. They're actually considering killing me. But I thought the system would just find another vessel. Eventually, yes, but a coordinated extraction performed by representatives from multiple pantheons could theoretically contain the released energy long enough to implement restrictions. They'd cage it, Issei realized. Bind it so it couldn't fully awaken in someone else. Amaterasu inclined her head slightly. This one regrets delivering such news after your achievement. Issei paced the frost-covered floor, his mind racing. What about our sponsors? The sanctuary agreement. The nexus remains inviolable, Amaterasu assured him. But sanctuary was granted with understanding that you would work toward control. If the council formally classifies the system as a Class 1 threat, the terms could be reinterpreted to require more direct supervision. Supervision or imprisonment? Issei asked sharply. The distinction would become academic, Amaterasu admitted. Issei felt the pendant against his chest warm slightly, as if responding to his agitation. So what do we do? We accelerate, Amaterasu replied with unexpected directness. This one has consulted with Isis and Lakshmi. We agree that traditional training methodologies are now insufficient. You must demonstrate mastery beyond what the council believes possible. How? Integration, Amaterasu said, not merely manifesting each aspect separately, but combining them harmoniously. She gestured, and the frost-covered arena began to transform again. The Norse runes faded, replaced by a complex mandala pattern overlaid with Japanese kanji, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Hindu symbols. This one will guide you through the Eastern Dragon aspects while we await Freya's return, Amaterasu continued. Prepare yourself. This will be intense. Issei couldn't help but laugh, a short, sharp sound with little humor. More intense than turning into a frost dragon. Great. Amaterasu's perfect composure cracked slightly, a hint of sympathy showing in her sun-bright eyes. This one understands your frustration. None expected the awakening to progress so rapidly or attract such immediate attention. It's not your fault, Issei sighed. I just wish I understood why this is happening to me specifically. Why now? Why here? Perhaps understanding will come through mastery, Amaterasu suggested. Now, center yourself in the mandala. This one will guide you through the manifestation of Seryu, the Azure Dragon of the East. Quote, for the next several hours, Issei trained under Amaterasu's precise guidance. Unlike Freya's confrontational approach, the sun goddess led him through formal kata and breathing exercises designed to awaken the Eastern Dragon aspect gradually. Where the Norse aspect had manifested as frost and crystalline power, the Japanese dragon energy expressed itself as flowing water and purifying light. Blue-green scales formed along different pathways on his body, following the meridian lines that Amaterasu identified as Kai channels. Instead of wings, this NS formation produced swirling currents of water vapor that condensed and dispersed around him in response to his movements. By the time Freya returned from Asgard, Issei had managed partial manifestation of the eastern aspect. His arms covered in azure scales that seemed to flow like water despite their solid form. The Valkyrie entered the transformed arena with purposeful strides, her expression tight with controlled anger. She stopped short at the sight of Issei's new transformation. The Seryu aspect, she observed. Impressive progress. How did it go in Asgard? Issei asked, allowing the azure scales to recede. Freya and Amaterasu exchanged significant glances before the Valkyrie answered. Not well, she admitted. Thor's faction has gained support. My testimony was selectively received. Meaning they heard what supported their preconceptions and dismissed the rest. Freya's hand tightened around her spear. The council is moving toward classification as we feared. This one has informed Issei of the implications, Amaterasu said. Freya nodded sharply. Then he understands why we need to accelerate further. I've been doing nothing but accelerate since I got here, Issei pointed out. Fatigue evident in his voice. I've manifested two completely different draconic aspects in a single day. And it's impressive, Freya acknowledged. But not to change the council's trajectory. She approached the mandala's edge, studying the patterns with critical attention. We need something more dramatic. Something that proves definitively that the system is under your control rather than the reverse. This one concurs, Amaterasu said. Perhaps the integration exercise we discussed. Freya frowned thoughtfully. It's risky. Integration usually takes months of practice with individual aspects first. Risk becomes necessity when alternatives diminish, Amaterasu replied. Issei looked between them. What exactly is integration? Manifesting multiple aspects simultaneously, Freya explained. Not shifting between them, but expressing them concurrently in perfect balance. That's possible, Issei asked. Theoretically, Freya replied. The Supreme Dragon system was originally unified before being fragmented across Pantheons. In theory, you could reunify aspects under your control. But no one has actually done it, Issei guessed. Not for millennia, Amaterasu confirmed. The last recorded integration occurred before the Great Partition. Freya paced the edge of the mandala, clearly weighing options. There's another way, she said finally. A more direct demonstration of control and worthiness. This one senses you have a specific suggestion, Amaterasu observed. Freya stopped pacing and faced them directly. The Bifrost trial. Amaterasu's perfect composure slipped completely for a moment, genuine shock crossing her features. That is unprecedented. No non-Asgardian has ever been permitted. Desperate times, Freya interrupted. If Issei could complete the trial, not even Thor could argue against his worthiness. What exactly is the Bifrost trial? Issei asked. A sacred challenge, Freya explained. A journey across all 9 realms of Norse cosmology, facing a specific trial in each. It is traditionally required of any who would wield authority in Asgard. 9 trials in 9 realms, Issei said slowly. That sounds time-consuming. I thought we were in a hurry. Time flows differently between realms, Freya reminded him. What might take days subjectively could translate to mere hours here. The Nexus sponsors would need to approve such an expedition, Amaterasu pointed out. Sanctuary terms restrict departure. For normal purposes, yes, Freya conceded. But there's precedent for ritual exceptions. Especially when relevant to mastering abilities. She turned to Issei, her expression more open than he'd seen before. The choice must be yours. The Bifrost trial is dangerous, potentially lethal even for Aesir. But success would establish your legitimacy in ways nothing else could. Issei considered the options carefully. Continued training in the Nexus seemed safer but might not progress quickly enough to prevent the Council's classification. The trial sounded incredibly dangerous, but offered a chance to definitively prove his control. The pendant around his neck warmed slightly, as if responding to his thoughts. If I attempt this trial, he asked, would you guide me through it? Something flickered in Freya's ice-blue eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. I would. As your sponsor and instructor, I would stand as your witness. This one must caution that such a journey carries significant risk, Amaterasu interjected. The Norse Ilms are particularly hostile to outside influences. But if it works, Issei mused, it could solve our immediate problem with the council. It would, Freya confirmed. Completing the Bifrost Real would force acknowledgement of your control and worthiness across all pantheons, not just the Norse. The trial is recognized universally as a supreme test of character and ability. Decision crystallized in Issei's mind. Then I'll do it. When can we start? Freya's expression shifted to one of grim satisfaction. Immediately. The council convenes for final classification in 36 hours. We need to complete the trial before then. This one will inform the other sponsors, Amaterasu said, clearly still concerned but accepting the decision. Preparations will be required. As the sun goddess departed to arrange matters, Freya approached Issei directly, lowering her voice so only he could hear. There's something you should know before we commit to this path, she said, her tone unusually personal. The reason I suggested the Bifrost trial isn't purely political. No, Issei prompted when she hesitated. Freya's gaze held his with unexpected intensity. The trial doesn't merely test ability or control. It reveals true nature, who you are at your core, beneath all masks and pretensions. And that matters to you? Issei asked, suddenly aware of how close she stood. More than you know, Freya admitted. I told you that as a Valkyrie, my first loyalty is to worthiness itself. What I didn't explain is why. She hesitated again, then continued in a voice barely above a whisper. My position in Asgard is complicated. As daughter of the Allfather but raised among the Valkyrie, I exist between worlds, neither fully royal nor truly independent. For centuries, I've balanced those roles, trying to serve both without compromising either. That sounds lonely, Issei observed quietly. Something vulnerable flashed across Freya's face before her expression hardened again. It is what it is. But it's why I need to know if you're truly worthy, not just of the system's power or Asgard's alliance, but of. She trailed off, seemingly unable to complete the thought. Of what? Issei pressed gently. Freya shook her head slightly, her moment of openness passing. Of the responsibilities that come with power, she finished, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. The trial will reveal the truth beyond any doubt. Though Issei sensed there was more she wasn't saying, he didn't push further. Then let's prepare. What do I need to know? Grateful for the return to practicalities, Freya outlined the structure of the trial. 9 realms, 9 challenges, each testing a different aspect of worthiness. Strength in Jotunheim, wisdom in Alfheim, endurance in Niflheim, and so on. And if I fail any of these tests, some failures mean death, Freya said bluntly. Others merely dishonor. But to satisfy the council, you must complete all 9 successfully. No pressure, Issei muttered. One more thing, Freya added, her expression softening slightly. Throughout the trial, you'll face temptations designed to reveal your true desires and fears. Whatever you experience, whatever you see or feel, remember that it's part of the test. Temptations, Issei repeated. What kind of temptations? For the first time since he'd met her, Freya looked genuinely uncomfortable. The kind that speak to your deepest self. For warriors, it might be ultimate victory. For scholars, forbidden knowledge. She hesitated, for those with other desires, other temptations. The implication hung in the air between them, creating a tension Issei hadn't anticipated. Before he could respond, Amaterasu returned, accompanied by both Isis and Lakshmi. The sponsors have conferred, Amaterasu announced formally. This one is pleased to report unanimous agreement. The Bifrost trial is approved as consistent with sanctuary terms. Isis stepped forward, her staff glowing with golden light. We have prepared what assistance we can offer, though the trial itself must be faced by you alone, with only your chosen witness to accompany you. Shi-Han. Dead Issei, a small golden scarab that pulsed with inner light. This will help you perceive the true nature of illusions you encounter. The trial is known for deceptive challenges. Lakshmi approached next, her movements graceful and deliberate. In her hands she carried a small vial containing what appeared to be liquid light. This essence of Soma will restore your energy between trials. Use it sparingly, its power is limited. Amaterasu completed the circle, offering a small paper talisman covered in complex calligraphy. This ofuda contains a fraction of purification energy. It will cleanse corruption once, but no more. Choose its use wisely. Issei accepted each gift with appropriate gratitude, tucking them carefully into dimensional pockets that Freya helped him create. The Valkyrie herself added a final item, a small rune-carved stone that glowed with blue-white energy. A fragment of Yggdrasil itself, she explained. It will guide your path between realms should we become separated. With preparations complete, the 4 sponsors formed a circle around Issei and Freya. Each began to chant in their native tongue, energies of their respective pantheons swirling around them in complex patterns. This is it, Freya said quietly, standing shoulder to shoulder with Issei. Once the gateway opens, we step through together. No hesitation, no looking back. I'm ready, Issei replied, surprised to find he meant it. The prismatic gem in his hand pulsed with anticipation, and he felt the Norse aspect of the supreme dragon system stirring within him, recognizing the energies being summoned. The chanting reached a crescendo, and reality split open before them, not a portal like those Issei had seen before, but a bridge of crystalline rainbow light stretching into infinity. The Bifrost, the rainbow bridge connecting the realms of Norse cosmology. Now, Freya commanded, and together they stepped onto the bridge. The nexus vanished behind them as they were enveloped in prismatic light. Hurled through dimensions toward the first of 9 trials that would determine not just Issei's fate, but potentially the fate of all pantheons as the convergence approached. As the rainbow light engulfed them completely, Issei felt Freya's hand close around his, a gesture of solidarity that surprised him coming from the usually reserved Valkyrie. He returned the pressure, wing strength from the connection as they plunged toward the first realm. Whatever awaited them, he wasn't facing it alone. Chapter 2 End Chapter 3, Sun and Shadow. Cherry blossom petals drifted lazily through still air, defying normal physics as they spiraled in perfect geometric patterns. Each petal glowed with subtle inner light, casting prismatic reflections across the tatami floor where Issei sat in Caesar position. Back straight, hands resting on his thighs. Opposite him, Amaterasu mirrored his posture with flawless precision, her formal kimono arranged in perfect folds that somehow Veer wrinkled despite hours of meditation. Your mind wanders again, she observed, her voice neither accusatory nor frustrated, simply stating a fact. Issei sighed, rolling tension from his shoulders. Sorry, it's been a week since the Bifrost trial, but I still find myself thinking about it. This one understands. Such experiences leave lasting impressions. Amaterasu's eyes studied him with had peculiar intensity that always made Issei feel simultaneously exposed and protected. The Norse realms revealed much about your character. That was an understatement. The 9 trials had tested every aspect of Issei's being, his courage in the frozen wastes of Niflheim, his wisdom facing the light elves of Alfheim, his restraint among the temptations of Vanaheim. He had faced frost giants in Jotunheim, navigated the treacherous politics of the dwarven forges in Nidavellir, and stood his ground against the armies of the dead in Helheim. Throughout it all, Freya had stood witness, neither intervening nor advising. Simply observing as Issei drew upon different aspects of the supreme dragon system to overcome each challenge. Their relationship had shifted during those trials, evolving from instructor and student to something Issei couldn't quite define. Deeper, more complex, charged with unspoken recognition. The trial changed things, Issei admitted, refocusing on his current teacher. Between Freya and me, this one has observed, Amaterasu replied with characteristic formality that nevertheless contained a hint of, was it amusement? The Valkyrie's assessment of why our worthiness appears to have expanded beyond her official capacity. Issei felt heat rise to his cheeks. It's not. We haven't. This one does not require clarification, Amaterasu interrupted gently. Connections between beings of power follow their own paths. This one merely observes that your successful completion of the Bifrost trial has altered many dynamics, political and otherwise. That much was undeniable. Upon their return from the trial, the Council of 12 had been forced to reconsider their classification of the Supreme Dragon system. No one had completed the Bifrost trial in centuries. Certainly no outsider to Norse tradition, and Issei's success had forced acknowledgement of his control over the awakening power within him. The immediate threat of extraction had receded, though Issei remained under close observation. His 4 sponsors continued their instruction, each focusing on different aspects of the system corresponding to their pantheons, draconic traditions. Ode marked his third intensive session with Amaterasu, focusing on the Eastern Dragon aspects, Seryu's water affinity, purification abilities, and connection to spiritual energies. Shall we continue? Issei asked, pulling himself back to the present. Amaterasu inclined her head slightly. This one believes a different approach may prove beneficial. Theory and meditation have their place, but experience remains the superior teacher. Quote, experience. Issei perked up, eager for something more active than the formal meditation they'd been practicing. What did you have in mind? Instead of answering directly, Amaterasu rose in a single fluid motion, her kimono settling perfectly around her. This one has received concerning reports from our realm. Perhaps it is time you witnessed firsthand what the convergence threatens. Issei scrambled to his feet with considerably less grace. You mean leave the Nexus? Go to Japan, to sacred sites now experiencing disturbances. Amaterasu ed toward the shoji screen that separated their meditation space from the rest of the Nexus library. The sanctuary terms permit excursions for educational purposes, provided a sponsor accompanies you. Wait, really? Issei hadn't left the Nexus in nearly 2 weeks of subjective time. The possibility of seeing the outside world, even briefly, sent a surge of excitement through him. What about the Council's monitoring? This one has obtained necessary permissions. The hint of satisfaction in Amaterasu's voice suggested this hadn't been a simple bureaucratic matter. The Japanese Pantheon maintains sovereignty over its sacred territories. The Council's oversight does not extend fully within our boundaries. As Amaterasu slid open the shoji screen, the meditation room's illusion of a traditional Japanese temple dissolved, revealing the familiar impossible architecture of the Nexus library beyond. They walked together through towering bookshelves that seemed to extend infinitely upward. Passing scholars and beings from various pantheons who now regarded Issei with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect since his completion of the Bifrost trial. This one must prepare you for what we will encounter, Amaterasu said as they approached a circular platform inscribed with complex manji patterns. Since your awakening, your perception has altered. The human world will not appear as you remember it. Different how? Issei asked, stepping onto the platform beside her. You now perceive the layers of reality simultaneously, the physical world visible to ordinary humans, and the spiritual dimensions that interpenetrate it. She traced a complex pattern in the air, causing the platform to glow with golden light. For one containing the Supreme Dragon System, the boundaries between these layers have become permeable. Before Issei could ask further questions, the platform flared brilliantly. The Nexus library dissolved around them, replaced by a disorienting kaleidoscope of sensations as they transitioned between dimensions. Unlike the raw power of the Bifrost, this journey felt more controlled, more precise, like slipping between molecules rather than tearing through reality. When the light faded, they stood at the base of stone steps leading up to a Shinto shrine. Ancient trees surrounded them, their canopies filtering sunlight into dappled patterns. For a moment, everything seemed normal, exactly as Issei remembered the human world. Then his enhanced perception clicked into place, and he gasped. Overlaid on the physical shrine, he could see ghostly architectural elements, structures that existed partially in another dimension. The trees pulsed with visible life energy, glowing networks that mapped their connection to the soil beneath. The air itself contained swirling currents of what could only be described as spiritual essence, some bright and vital, others darker and more disturbed. Most shocking of all were the people ascending and descending the shrine steps. Each human was surrounded by a complex aura that revealed aspects of their nature, history, and connections. Some trailed wisps of memory or emotion behind them like comet tails. Others carried burdens visible as shadowy weights upon their shoulders. This is overwhelming, Issei murmured, blinking rapidly as he tried to process the multiple layers of information bombarding his senses. This one anticipated your reaction. Amaterasu's hand touched his shoulder lightly, the first time she had initiated physical contact. Focus on my presence. Use it as anchor while your perception adjusts. Issei did as instructed, turning his attention to Amaterasu. What he saw nearly buckled his knees. The formal, beautiful woman beside him was merely the visible aspect of something far greater. Radiating outward from her human form was a corona of solar energy so intense it should have incinerated everything within a kilometer. This energy formed complex patterns that ended into dimensions Issei couldn't name, connecting to the sun itself through channels that defied Euclidean geometry. Yet somehow this cosmic power was perfectly contained, meticulously controlled, channeled through the elegant figure who stood beside him with perfect poise. "You're much more than you appear," Issei managed, awed by the true scale of her being. "As are you." Amaterasu's voice carried a hint of genuine warmth. This one's current incarnation represents only a fragment of complete divinity. Even this reduced state would overwhelm human perception without significant constraints. She gestured toward the shrine above them. "Come." The disturbance manifests most clearly at the inner sanctuary. As they ascended the stone steps, Issei worked to control his expanded perception, focusing on the immediate physical reality while allowing the spiritual dimensions to remain as background awareness rather than overwhelming foreground. By the time they reached the shrine's main courtyard, he had achieved a workable balance. The shrine appeared well maintained but modestly sized, one of countless Shinto sacred sites scattered throughout Japan. What made it significant wasn't apparent from its physical appearance. "Azumo Taisha," Amaterasu said, naming the shrine, "one of the oldest sites of worship in Japan. This branch shrine maintains a connection to the main MP Lex several hundred kilometers from here. It looks ordinary," Issei observed, though his enhanced senses detected complex energy patterns flowing through the grounds. To human perception, yes. Intentionally so. Amaterasu moved toward the main sanctuary building, her steps measured and deliberate. Sacred sites function best when they blend seamlessly with the human world while maintaining their spiritual significance. As they approached the sanctuary, Issei noticed shrine attendants, Miko in traditional white and red garments, watching them with barely concealed awe. They bowed deeply to Amaterasu, murmuring formal greetings that Issei's enhanced hearing caught despite the distance. "Ama no Mika Nushi returns. The sun walks among us. She brings the dragon vessel." Amaterasu acknowledged their reverence with slight nods but didn't pause. At the sanctuary entrance, she slid open a door that ordinary visitors would never be permitted to access, revealing a small chamber containing a simple altar. A sacred mirror stood at its center, surrounded by offerings of rice, sake, and fresh flowers. "The disturbance originates here," Amaterasu said, her formal tone taking on greater solemnity. "Observe the mirror with your complete perception." Issei focused on the mirror, allowing his draconic senses to fully engage. At first, the mirror appeared to be exactly what it seemed, a finely crafted but otherwise ordinary object of religious significance. Then, as his perception deepened, he saw beyond its physical form. The mirror served as a dimensional anchor, maintaining connections between multiple layers of reality. Energy flowed through it in complex patterns, linking this modest shrine to far greater power centers throughout Japan and beyond. But something was wrong. The energy patterns showed disruption, places where the flow kinked and distorted like a garden hose with partial blockage. "I can see it," Issei said, stepping closer. "The energy isn't flowing correctly. It's like there's interference." "Precisely." Amaterasu moved to stand beside him. "This mirror is one of 66 sacred anchors that maintain stability between the mortal world and the divine realms of the Japanese Pantheon. Since the awakening of the Supreme Dragon System, 43 have shown similar disturbances." Issei frowned, guilt flickering through him. "Because of me, my awakening caused this." "Not directly." Amaterasu's tone softened slightly. "The approaching convergence affects all dimensional boundaries. Your awakening and these disturbances are symptoms of the same cosmic process." She gestured toward the mirror. "This one believes you may be able to assist in restoration. The Eastern Dragon aspects within the Supreme Dragon system resonate with these anchor points. In theory, you could harmonize the disrupted flow." "In theory," Issei repeated skeptically. "Has anyone actually done this before?" "Not for many centuries," Amaterasu admitted. "But the principles are sound. Eastern dragons maintained cosmic harmony before the formation of formalized pantheons." Issei approached the mirror cautiously. "What do I need to do?" "Manifest the Seryu aspect partially. Focus on the purification elements rather than combat abilities. Then establish resonance with the mirror's energy signature." Drawing on his training from the past weeks, Issei called forth the Eastern Dragon aspect of the system. Unlike the dramatic transformation of the Norse aspect, This manifestation was subtle, azure scales shimmering into existence along his forearms. His eyes shifting to vertical pupils, his senses becoming even more attuned to spiritual energies. He extended his scaled hands toward the mirror, careful not to touch its physical surface. Immediately, he could feel the disrupted energy patterns responding to his presence, vibrating at frequencies that both harmonized and clashed with his own draconic energy. The patterns are recognizing me, Issei observed, watching as spiraling currents of blue-green energy formed between his hands and the mirror. But something's fighting back, something that doesn't belong. This one perceives it as well, Amaterasu confirmed, her eyes narrowing slightly. Corruption. Foreign energy. Identify its signature if possible. Issei concentrated harder, tracing the disrupted patterns to their source. The corruption appeared as dark knots within the otherwise luminous energy flows, malignant intrusions that pulsed with a sickly violet light reminiscent of. It's the same, Issei realized with sudden clarity. The same energy signature as the void cultists who attacked me when I first awakened. Amaterasu's perfect composure slipped momentarily, genuine concern crossing her features. This is troubling. The void's influence should not penetrate sacred anchors so easily. Could they have done this deliberately? Targeted these shrines specifically? Perhaps. Amaterasu studied the corruption patterns with intense focus. Or perhaps your awakening drew their attention to vulnerabilities that already existed. She stepped back slightly. Proceed with the purification. This one will maintain protective barriers should the corruption respond aggressively. Issei nodded, focusing more intently on the mirror. He drew deeper on the Seryu aspect, feeling its purifying energy flowing through his transformed limbs. Eastern dragons, he had learned, were intimately connected to water, not merely physical water, but the conceptual essence of purification, renewal, and life-giving flow. He visualized this energy as a clear, cleansing current washing through the mirror's complex dimensional connections, seeking out the corrupt knots and dissolving them through harmonious counterpoint rather than direct opposition. The response was immediate and unexpected. As his purification energy touched the first knot of corruption, the violet light pulsed violently. The mirror vibrated, emitting a high-pitched tone that would have been inaudible to normal human ears. The corruption began to actively resist, coalescing into more defined patterns that reminded Issei of defensive formations. It's conscious, he realized, not pausing his efforts but adapting his approach. The corruption isn't just energy, it's responding intelligently. Continue, Amaterasu urged, her own power manifesting as a golden barrier around the sanctuary. This one will ensure it cannot escape or summon reinforcements. Issei pressed harder, sending purification energy more forcefully into the corruption. The mirror's vibration intensified, and suddenly, images began forming on its surface, not reflections, but windows into other places. He glimpsed fragments of scenes, a massive, void-like emptiness where crystalline structures floated in impossible configurations, beings of mercury-like substance gathered around a pulsing dark core, diagrams showing the approaching alignments of dimensional boundaries. Most disturbing of all, he saw a map of Japan with 66 points marked, each corresponding to a sacred anchor like this one. They're mapping the anchors, Issei reported, maintaining his focus on purification despite the disturbing visions. Planning something coordinated. The convergence, Amaterasu confirmed grimly. They seek to accelerate it by compromising dimensional stability points. The corruption fought back more aggressively now, sending tendrils of violet energy lashing toward Issei's hands. Where they touched his scaled skin, they left airy burning sensations, not physical heat, but spiritual corrosion that tried to contaminate his own energy. Issei refused to retreat, drawing even deeper on the Seryu aspect. He allowed more of the transformation to manifest. Scales spreading further up his arms, a subtle ridge forming along his spine, his senses expanding to encompass the entire shrine grounds and beyond. With this enhanced connection, he could perceive the shrine's place within the larger network of sacred sites. He saw how the 66 anchors formed a complex geometric pattern across Japan, maintaining boundaries that had stood for millennia. The corruption wasn't random. It targeted specific nodes in this pattern, seeking to create cascading failures. They're being strategic, Issei reported as he continued working, targeting the anchors in a specific sequence to maximize damage to the boundary network. This one feared as much, Amaterasu replied, her barrier strengthening as she sensed increased resistance. The void seeks chaos, but pursues it with disturbing order. With renewed determination, Issei altered his approach. Rather than simply pushing against the corruption, he began integrating aspects of the Norse dragon energy he had mastered during the Bifrost trial, not the frost powers, but the conceptual strengths of endurance and inevitable renewal. He wove these qualities into his purification energy, creating a hybrid approach that the corruption couldn't adapt to as easily. The mirror's surface cleared gradually, the violent pulsing of the corrupt nodes diminishing as Issei's combined energy washed through the connections. The visions faded, replaced by the mirror's natural reflective surface, though Issei could still perceive the dimensional anchoring functions beyond the physical object. As the last traces of corruption dissolved, the mirror emitted a clear, bell-like tone that resonated perfectly with the Seryu energy flowing through Issei. The disrupted patterns realigned, energy once again flowing smoothly through the anchor point. Issei stepped back, allowing the draconic manifestation to recede gradually. It's done. The anchor is purified. Amaterasu's golden barrier remained in place for several moments longer as she verified the completion of the cleansing. Finally satisfied, she allowed her power to fade, the sanctuary returning to its ordinary apeiron. Though Issei's enhanced perception still showed the complex energies flowing through the space. This one is impressed, Amaterasu said, genuine approval warming her formal tone. Few could have accomplished such purification on their first attempt. Your integration of Norse and Eastern draconic aspects was innovative. It felt natural, Issei admitted, studying his hands as the last scales faded back into human-appearing skin. Like the different aspects wanted to work together once I gave them the opportunity. That aligns with this one's theory. Amaterasu moved to stand before the mirror, her reflection somehow containing more dimensions than should have been possible. The Supreme Dragon system seeks reunification, not by dominating its vessel, but through harmonious integration guided by a worthy consciousness. She turned to face him directly, and for the first time since they'd met, her formal speech pattern slipped. You're doing something unprecedented, Issei. The system isn't just awakening in you, it's evolving. The sudden shift to first-person speech caught Issei off guard. Before he could comment on it, Amaterasu's formality returned, like a mask sliding back into place. This one suggests we verify the anchor's stability before proceeding to others requiring attention, she said, once again the perfectly composed goddess. Others. Issei glanced around the sanctuary. You mean we're going to purify more anchors today? If you are willing. Amaterasu studied him with those sun-bright eyes. Your assistance would significantly accelerate our protective efforts. Of course I'll help, Issei agreed immediately. If the void cultists are targeting these anchors deliberately, we need to secure as many as possible. Something like approval FL. Ickered across Amaterasu's perfect features. This one appreciates your willingness. There are 4 additional anchors within reasonable travel distance that show similar corruption patterns. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary, one of the shrine maidens approached cautiously, bowing deeply before addressing Amaterasu in formal Japanese. Though Issei's Japanese was conversational at best, he found he could understand her perfectly, another gift of the system's integration with his consciousness. Honored goddess, forgive this humble one's intrusion, the Miko said, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. Visitors have arrived who claim authority from the Divine Council. They demand to inspect the sacred anchor. Amaterasu's expression revealed nothing, but Issei sensed a subtle shift in the energy surrounding her, like the surface tension of water moments before it boils. How many? She asked simply. 3, illustrious one. They bear credentials from the Greek, Celtic, and Mesopotamian pantheons. Amaterasu exchanged a meaningful glance with Issei. The council moves quickly to assert oversight. This one finds their timing suggestive. You think they knew we'd be here? Issei asked quietly. This one thinks very little occurs beyond the council's awareness these days, Amaterasu replied. To the shrine maiden, she added, inform them that the Japanese Pantheon acknowledges their credentials but reminds them of sovereignty protocols. They may observe but not interfere. The Miko bowed again and departed to deliver the message. Amaterasu turned to Issei, her voice lowering. This complicates matters. Council representatives have the right to monitor your activities outside the Nexus, but their presence will constrain what we can accomplish. Because they don't trust me, Issei guessed. Because they fear what you represent, Amaterasu corrected. The Supreme Dragon system exists outside their authority structures. Your growing mastery represents a power they cannot directly control. She considered for a moment before continuing. This one proposes a strategic adjustment. We will engage with the Council representatives directly, addressing your concerns while demonstrating your progress. This may prove more valuable than continuing to multiple anchors today. Political maneuvering wasn't covered in my training, Issei noted with a wry smile. Yet it remains essential to your role, Amaterasu replied. The system grants power, but navigating the Pantheons requires different skills. They exited the sanctuary together, emerging into the shrine's main courtyard where 3 figures stood waiting. Though they appeared human at first glance, Issei's enhanced perception revealed their true nature immediately. The first was tall and muscular, with close-cropped dark hair and a perfectly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive modern suit, but carried himself with the confident posture of someone more accustomed to armor. The aura surrounding him flickered with lightning energy barely contained within his human form, clearly a representative of the Greek pantheon. Beside him stood a woman of striking appearance, wild red hair cascading down her back. Green eyes that seemed to shift like forest shadows. Her modern clothing, dark jeans and a leather jacket, couldn't disguise the primal energy that swirled around her, connecting to earth and blood in equal measure. The Celtic representative, without question. The third figure was the most unsettling, a slender man with golden brown skin and eyes so dark they appeared to absorb light rather than reflect it. His business attire was impeccable, but ancient symbols shifted beneath the fabric, occasionally visible as his body moved. The complexity of his aura marked him as Masop, Otamian, one of the oldest pantheons still active in council politics. Lady Amaterasu, the Greek representative inclined his head in a gesture that managed to be simultaneously respectful and condescending. The council appreciates your cooperation in this matter. His gaze shifted to Issei, eyes narrowing slightly as he perceived the lingering energy of the recent purification. And the dragon vessel as well. How convenient. Representative Kuranos, Amaterasu acknowledged with perfect politeness that nevertheless contained a hint of steel. This one observes that the council's interest in routine maintenance of Japanese sacred sites is unprecedented. The Greek, Kuranos, smiled thinly. These are unprecedented times. The Council has authorized expanded monitoring of all activities related to dimensional stability. His gaze remained fixed on Issei, especially those involving recently classified entities. This one was unaware that the Supreme Dragon system remained classified following successful completion of the Bifrost trial, Amaterasu replied smoothly. The Celtic woman stepped forward, her movement carrying predatory grace. Classification was adjusted, not removed. The vessel remains under observation protocols. Issei Hyodo, Issei corrected firmly, tired of being referred to indirectly. My name is Issei Hyodo. The woman's green eyes flashed with something like amusement. Indeed it is. I am Morrigan Corvus, representing the Celtic pantheon in this matter. She studied him with undisguised interest. The one who conquered the Bifrost. Impressive for a former human. The Mesopotamian representative remained silent, his dark eyes observing everything with ancient patience. Unlike his companions, he made no introduction, seeming content to watch and evaluate. This one has followed all required protocols, Amaterasu stated. The educational excursion was registered with the Nexus administration and approved under sanctuary terms. No one questions your procedural compliance, Lady Amaterasu, Kuranos said smoothly. Our presence is merely observational. The Council is particularly interested in the vessels, pardon me, Mr. Hyodo's interaction with dimensional anchor points. The way he emphasized Issei's name made it clear the correction had been noted but not necessarily accepted. Then observe, Amaterasu replied. This one has nothing to hide. Issei Hyodo has successfully purified corruption from this anchor point, corruption bearing the energy signature of void cultist activity. That caught their attention. The T.Re representatives exchanged quick glances. Void corruption. Here, Morrigan's casual demeanor vanished instantly. You're certain? This one does not make such claims lightly, Amaterasu responded. Issei Hyodo identified the signature from his previous encounter with void agents. The Mesopotamian representative finally spoke, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers overlaid. This information alters assessment parameters. Demonstration of purification technique would be informative. His strange speech pattern reminded Issei of the custodian at the Nexus L. Library, as if human language was a tool being used with technical precision rather than natural fluency. The purification is already complete, Issei pointed out. For this anchor, yes, Kuranos acknowledged. But there are others nearby requiring similar attention, are there not, Lady Amaterasu? The implication was clear. They knew exactly what Amaterasu had planned before their arrival. Is one had intended to address 4 additional compromised anchors today, Amaterasu confirmed, revealing nothing in her perfect composure. Then we shall accompany you, Morgan declared, not quite making it a request. If void cultists are indeed targeting dimensional anchors, the council must be fully informed. Amaterasu considered for a moment before nodding slightly. This one accepts your observation. Provided Pantheon sovereignty remains respected. The anchors themselves remain under Japanese authority. Of course, Kuranos agreed smoothly. We merely wish to witness Mr. Hyodo's techniques. The council is very interested in his development. The subtle emphasis on the last word sent a chill down Issei's spine. These weren't merely observers, they were evaluators, gathering information that would determine how the council approached him in the future. As they prepared to depart for the next shrine, Issei felt the prismatic gem in his hand pulse slightly, responding to his unease. The supreme dragon system within him stirred, as if recognizing potential threats. Be cautious, partner, Diedrag's voice resonated within his mind. Council representatives rarely reveal their true motives. Issei acknowledged the warning silently as he followed Amaterasu and the 3 representatives from the shrine grounds. Whatever their actual purpose, he would need to demonstrate control and competence while revealing as little as possible about the full extent of his developing abilities. The political game had begun in earnest, and he was playing for stakes he was only beginning to understand. Their journey to the next anchor point took them deep into mountain forests north of Tokyo. Rather than conventional transportation, Amaterasu opened a pathway, not quite a dimensional portal, but a manipulation of space that allowed them to traverse great distances in mere steps. As they walked, the surroundings blurred and shifted, forests and mountains flowing past scenery viewed from a high-speed train. Sacred pathways, Morgan commented, seeming genuinely impressed. The Japanese pantheon maintains these connections better than most. Necessity and philosophy align, Amaterasu replied. This one's people have always understood the value of proper connections between spaces. Issei observed the technique with fascination. Unlike the dramatic portal openings he'd witnessed before, this method seemed to work with existing spatial relationships rather than tearing through them, elegant and efficient, leaving minimal disturbance in the dimensional boundaries. The Mesopotamian representative walked beside Issei, his dark eyes occasionally flicking sideways to study him. Integration progresses rapidly, he observed in that strange multi-layered voice. System architecture adapting to vessel parameters beyond projected models. Excuse me, Issei wasn't sure how to respond to the cryptic comment. He means you're developing faster than they expected. Morgan translated from ahead of them, her enhanced hearing apparently catching the quiet exchange. The stuffy old pantheons had mathematical models predicting how quickly you'd master the system. You're exceeding them. The Mesopotamian representative inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying this interpretation. Is that a problem? Issei asked, addressing the question to all 3 representatives. That depends, Kuranos replied from the front of their procession, on whether your control develops as quickly as your power. Before Issei could respond, the sacred pathway terminated, depositing them in a small clearing surrounded by ancient cedar trees. Unlike the first shrine with its formal architecture and attending priests, this sacred site was marked only by a simple stone altar and a small natural spring that bubbled from between moss-covered rocks. Inari's whisper, Amaterasu named the site. A power node connected to fertility and agricultural abundance. Less formally maintained than Azumo Taisha, but no less significant within the anchor network. Issei could immediately see what she meant. Despite the humble physical appearance, his enhanced perception revealed complex energy patterns flowing through the clearing, perhaps even more intricate than those at the formal shrine. The water from the spring carried spiritual essence that connected to fields and forests for kilometers in every direction. He could also see the corruption. Violet energy knotted more aggressively around this anchor point, pulsing with malignant purpose. The contamination is worse here, Issei observed, approaching the spring cautiously. More concentrated. This one concurs, Amaterasu confirmed. Rural anchors have fewer human attendants maintaining purification rituals. They become vulnerable more quickly when targeted. Kurano studied the site with narrowed eyes, lightning energy crackling subtly around his fingertips as he sensed the corruption. Greek territories have reported similar disturbances at rural sanctuaries. We attributed it to declining worship. A convenient explanation that misses the true cause, Morgan noted with a hint of criticism. The Celtic pantheon has observed systematic corruption patterns for months. Our warnings to the council were insufficiently heeded. The Mesopotamian representative knelt beside the spring, passing his hand through the air above the water without touching it. Void signature confirmed. Matches parameters of 17 incidents across 7 pantheons. 17. Issei looked to Amaterasu. You said 43 Japanese anchors were affected. Are we dealing with something much larger? The council has been monitoring the situation, Kuranos interjected smoothly before Amaterasu could respond. Certain details remain classified even from Pantheon representatives. How convenient, Issei muttered, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Morgan's lips quirked in what might have been approval. Indeed. Perhaps you'd demonstrate your purification technique now, Issei Hyodo. The council is most interested in how the Supreme Dragon system interacts with these corrupted energies. The request seemed reasonable on the surface, but Issei sensed underlying motives. The 3 representatives had positioned themselves at equidistant points around the spring, forming a triangle that felt suspiciously like a containment formation. They're testing you, partner, Diedrag's voice warned. But also measuring the system's capabilities for their records. Amaterasu had noticed the positioning as well. She moved to stand slightly closer to Issei, her presence a subtle reminder of her sponsorship and protection. This one will monitor the process to ensure Pantheon protocols are maintained, she stated, the formal words carrying clear warning to the representatives not to interfere. Issei approached the spring, considering his options. The corruption here was more aggressive than at the shrine. Attempting the same purification technique might reveal too much about his developing abilities to the watchful council representatives. Yet holding back I'd allow the corruption to resist his efforts. A solution came to him as he recalled Lakshmi's teachings about resonant frequencies. Each draconic aspect vibrated at specific energetic frequencies. Matching these precisely to the corruption's resonance might allow more efficient purification with less visible power expenditure. Issei knelt beside the spring, allowing the Seryu aspect to knife Saint subtly, not the visible scales and transformations from before, but a more contained expression of the Eastern Dragon's essence. To ordinary perception, only his eyes changed, pupils narrowing vertically for a moment before returning to normal. Rather than extending his hands directly as he had at the shrine, Issei placed them on the ground on either side of the spring, connecting to the Earth's natural energies. Through this connection, he began a more subtle purification, sending thin tendrils of draconic energy through the ground and into the water rather than projecting power directly. The representatives watched closely, their expressions revealing varying degrees of surprise at his restrained approach. Interesting methodology, Morgan observed. Using Earth as conductor rather than direct application. The Mesopotamian representative's dark eyes narrowed slightly. Efficiency increase noted. Power expenditure reduced by approximately 63% compared to standard purification protocols. Kuranos seemed less impressed. A more cautious approach. One wonders if it will prove sufficient against such concentrated corruption. Issei ignored their commentary, focusing entirely on the task. Through his connection to the Earth, he could sense the corruption's root system more clearly, how it had embedded itself not just in the visible spring, but throughout the soil and surrounding plant life. Rather than attacking it directly, he began a process more akin to displacement, introducing harmonious energy patterns that gradually pushed the corruption out of its established positions. As his approach progressed, the water in the spring began to clear visibly, changing from slightly clouded to crystal transparency. Plants around the clearing subtly straightened, leaves turning more vibrantly green as the corruption's influence receded. Most impressive, Morgan commented, genuine appreciation in her voice. Purification without destruction, a rare approach among power users. The Mesopotamian representative made no comment, but Issei noticed him making subtle gestures with his fingers, apparently recording measurements or observations in some non-physical medium. Kuranos watched with growing interest as the purification continued. The eastern aspects respond well to your direction, Mr. Hyodo. Have you found similar affinity with other pantheons, draconic elements? The question was casually delivered but clearly probing for information about Issei's progress with different aspects of the system. Each aspect has its own personality, Issei replied vaguely, maintaining his focus on the purification. The eastern dragons value harmony and balance. It makes their energy useful for this kind of work. Not entirely satisfied this non-answer but unwilling to push further while Issei was actively working, Kuranos fell silent. As the purification neared completion, Issei encountered an unexpected complication. At the core of the corruption, embedded deep within the spring's source, he found something different, not merely void energy, but a constructed object radiating the corruption. There's something here, he reported, pausing his work momentarily. Some kind of device or artifact. It's generating the corruption rather than just carrying it. All three representatives tensed visibly. Amaterasu moved closer, her formal composure unchanged but her energy signature intensifying. This one requests elaboration, she said. Can you determine its nature? Issei carefully extended more focused awareness toward the object, probing without directly touching it. It's small, maybe the size of a coin. Crystalline structure. It's pulsing in rhythm with something distant. Like it's receiving instructions. The Mesopotamian representative approached, kneeling on the opposite side of the spring. Extraction advisable. Council containment protocols should be implemented. Agreed, Kuranos said, all pretense of casual observation abandoned. This goes beyond simple corruption. If the void cultists are planting devices at anchor points, the implications are concerning, Amaterasu agreed, her tone revealing nothing of her thoughts on the matter. However, this remains Japanese sovereign territory. This one will oversee extraction. Morgan crossed her arms, her wild red hair stirring GHTLY with power that leaked from her controlled form. The Council has established protocols for handling void artifacts. This clearly falls under joint jurisdiction. Attention filled the clearing, as Pantheon politics collided with immediate practical concerns. Issei, still connected to the spring and sensing the artifact's increasingly erratic pulsing, made a decision. It's becoming unstable, he announced. Whatever we're going to do needs to happen now. Without waiting for the representatives to resolve their jurisdictional dispute, Issei modified his approach. Drawing on both the stern purification aspects and elements of the Norse containment techniques he'd learned during the Bifrost trial, he created a carefully structured energy pattern around the artifact. I can extract it safely, he stated, not asking permission but simply informing them of his intention. But I'll need to use more than just the eastern aspects. Amaterasu studied him for a moment before nodding slightly. Proceed with caution. This one authorizes necessary measures. The three representatives exchanged glances but offered no objection, the immediate threat overriding their desire to maintain control of the situation. Issei drew deeper on the Supreme Dragon system, this time allowing visible manifestation of multiple draconic aspects simultaneously. Azure scales formed along his right arm, channeling eastern purification energy, while crystalline frost patterns appeared on his left, drawing on Norse containment abilities. His eyes shifted color, one maintaining the vertical pupil of Seryu, the other taking on the Arctic blue of Nihagar's lineage. Dual manifestation, the Mesopotamian representative observed, his multilayered voice betraying surprise for the first time. Integer. Asian coefficient exceeding established parameters. Issei ignored the comment, focusing entirely on the task. With precise movements of his transformed hands, he established a dual-natured containment. NT field around the artifact, Eastern energy purifying its connection to the spring while Norse power created a frozen shell to prevent it from transmitting or receiving further signals. Slowly, carefully, He drew the contained artifact upward through the spring water. As it broke the surface, a small violet crystal no larger than a coin, Issei completed the containment, encasing it in layers of purifying and preserving energy. Done, he said, holding the contained artifact in his frost-covered palm. But it's still active somehow. I can feel it trying to communicate with something. Kuranos stepped forward, hand extended. The council will take possession for analysis and secure containment. Before Issei could respond, Amaterasu interjected smoothly. As this artifact was discovered on Japanese sovereign territory, protocol requires joint custody arrangements. This one proposes immediate transport to the Nexus for neutral examination. The Greek representative's eyes narrowed slightly, lightning energy crackling more visibly around him. The Council has exclusive jurisdiction over void artifacts under the emergency protocols of the Fourth Convocation. A dated interpretation, Morrigan commented, her casual tone belied by the predatory alertness in her posture. The Seventh Convocation established clear shared jurisdiction in cases involving sovereign territories. As the representatives argued legal technicalities, Issei noticed something disturbing. Despite his containment, the artifact was vibrating with increasing intensity, its violet glow strengthening even through the layers of draconic energy surrounding it. Something's wrong, he interrupted, drawing everyone's attention. It's responding to something, getting more active. The Mesopotamian representative moved with surprising speed, his hands forming complex symbols in the air around the contained artifact. Resonance cascade initiating. Secondary activation protocols detected. In simple terms, Issei demanded. It's a beacon, Morrigan translated grimly, and it just called for reinforcements. As if confirming her words, the air several meters from the spring shimmered and distorted. Reality seemed to fold inward upon itself, creating an opening unlike the clean portals Issei had witnessed before. This was a jagged tear, its edges leaking that same violet energy that characterized the Void cultist's power. Void incursion, Kuranos stated unnecessarily, lightning fully manifesting around his hands as he dropped all pretense of human limitation. Council jurisdiction is now absolute under combat protocols. Amaterasu's response was immediate and impressive. Without visible effort, she expanded her divine aura, golden light washing across the clearing in a protective barrier. This one reminds all parties that we stand on Japanese soil. Coordination is advised, but authority remains with this pantheon. Through the tear emerged three figures, similar to the Mercury-skinned void cultists Issei had encountered during his awakening, but more substantial, more defined in their physical forms. They wore armored suits that seemed to flow and shift with their movements. And each carried weapons that defied conventional description, objects that appeared to be simultaneously solid matter and concentrated void energy. The dragon vessel, the central figure stated, its voice carrying that same metallic quality Issei remembered. Convergence protocols accelerate, acquisition authorized. Without further preamble, all three attackers launched simultaneous strikes. Not at each other as Issei might have expected, but at him specifically. The clearing erupted into chaos. Kuranos hurled lightning with devastating precision, blasting one attacker backward into a tree with such force that the ancient cedar splintered. Morrigan transformed partially, her arms elongating into wing-like limbs covered in black feathers, talons replacing her fingers as she engaged. The second attacker with frightening speed. The Mesopotamian representative made no physical attack, instead inscribing complex symbols in the air that somehow interfered with the void entity's weapons, causing them to malfunction in unpredictable ways. Amaterasu stood perfectly still, yet her power radiated outward in waves of purifying light that seemed to cause the void entity's physical pain whenever it touched them. The third attacker broke through these defenses, charging directly at Issei with a weapon that resembled a spear formed of condensed darkness. Acting on instinct honed by his training, Issei completed the dual manifestation he had begun for the artifact extraction. Frost scales covered his left arm while azure water energy flowed along his right. As the attacker thrust its void spear toward his chest, Issei clapped his transformed hands together. The resulting collision of Norse and Eastern draconic energies created a shockwave that blasted outward in a perfect circle, catching the attacker mid-lunge and hurling it backward through the air. More importantly, the combined energy disrupted the void spear, causing it to dissipate into harmless particles. Not pausing to marvel at this new ability, Issei pressed his advantage. Drawing deeper on both aspects of the system, he moved with fluid grace that belied his human appearance. The frost and water energies spiraled around him as he engaged the recovering attacker, no longer separate powers but an integrated whole that responded to his will as naturally as breathing. Remarkable, he heard Morrigan calm, and as she tore into her opponent with talons that seemed to phase between physical and spiritual states. Full integration during combat, the models were indeed conservative. The void entity facing Issei adjusted its tactics, its mercury-like skin hardening into armor plates that deflected his initial strikes. Adaptation confirmed, it stated in that emotionless metallic voice. Extraction protocols modified, it counterattacked with unexpected speed, its form shifting to create additional limbs that struck from multiple angles simultaneously. Issei defended as best he could, but one attack broke through. A blade-like appendage slicing across his shoulder. Pain flared briefly, but something unexpected happened. Where the blade cut him, his blood didn't flow normally, instead, it crisped. Allied instantly into scales that matched the dual manifestation he was maintaining, sealing the wound while simultaneously strengthening that area against further attacks. The system protects its vessel. Diedrag's voice observed with satisfaction. Your integration progresses faster than anticipated. Taking advantage of his attacker's momentary surprise at this development, Issei launched a combined assault. Frost energy to slow the entity's adaptive capabilities while water energy sought out weaknesses in its structure. The dual attack proved effective, the void entity's form beginning to destabilize as conflicting draconic energies disrupted its cohesion. Across the clearing, his allies were similarly gaining the upper hand. Kuranos had his opponent pinned with sustained lightning. That prevented its mercury form from maintaining stability. Morrigan had literally torn her target into components that were struggling unsuccessfully to reassemble. The Mesopotamian representative continued his cryptic symbol writing, which now appeared to be preventing the dimensional tier from widening further. Only Amaterasu had yet to engage directly, her perfect composure unchanged as she maintained the golden barrier around the entire clearing. Yet Issei sensed she was doing far more than merely containing the battle. Her power was systematically purifying the entire area, preventing a trace of void energy from taking root in the sacred site. The void entity facing Issei made a final desperate attack, its form liquefying completely to flow around his defenses. Issei responded instinctively, drawing on a third aspect of the system that had remained dormant until now. A flicker of Egyptian draconic energy that manifested as golden hieroglyphs briefly appearing on his skin. These E-symbols responded to the liquid attack by creating boundaries the void entity couldn't cross, confining it into an increasingly restricted space. Containment failing, the entity stated, its voice distorting as its form compressed. Convergence inevitable regardless. The supreme dragon rises too late. With those cryptic words, all three void entities simultaneously self-destructed, not in conventional explosions, but imploding into dimensionless points that winked out of existence with soft popping sounds, leaving behind only faint traces of their violet energy signature. The dimensional tier wavered, beginning to close naturally now that its creators had vanished. The Mesopotamian representative continued his symbolic writing until the tear sealed completely, leaving no trace of its existence. For several moments, the clearing was silent save for the gentle bubbling of the now purified spring. The three council representatives and Amaterasu looked at Issei with expressions ranging from calculation to genuine amazement. 3 aspects, Kuranos said finally, lightning still crackling around his fingers as he processed what he'd witnessed. Manifested and integrated simultaneously. During combat conditions, without prior training in the Egyptian elements, Morrigan added, her arms returning to human form though her eyes retained an avian quality. Instinctive access rather than formalized instruction. The Mesopotamian representative said nothing, but his hands continued making subtle gestures, apparently recording observations for later analysis. Amaterasu allowed her barrier to fade gradually, the golden light retracting until only her normal divine aura remained. This one believes the immediate threat has been contained, she stated, her formal tone returning after the crisis. The artifact remains a concern. All eyes turned to the contained crystal still held in Issei's transformed hand. Despite the chaos of the battle, his containment had held. He combined Norse and Eastern energies keeping the violet crystal safely isolated. The artifact clearly served as both corruptor and beacon, Kuranos observed, professionalism reasserting itself now that combat had ended. The council must analyze it immediately. Agreed, Amaterasu replied. This one proposes immediate return to the Nexus where examination can proceed under neutral protocols, with representatives from all involved pantheons. For once, there seemed to be no disagreement. The coordinated attack had shifted priorities from jurisdictional disputes to practical security concerns. The vessel, Mr. Hyodo's performance should also be documented, the Mesopotamian representative added, finally speaking again. Integration capabilities exceed all previous theoretical models. Issei allowed the manifestations to recede gradually, the scales and frost patterns flowing back into his skin until only the prismatic gem in his hand remained visible. I'm happy to provide info. Our machine that helps understand what we're facing, he said carefully. But I'm not interested in being treated like a laboratory specimen. Morrigan's lips curved in a smile that managed to be simultaneously appreciative and predatory. Well said. The council sometimes forgets that power users are people first, classification second. No one suggests otherwise, Kuranos replied smoothly, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of Issei's personhood status. But unprecedented abilities require unprecedented observation. This one believes such discussions can continue at the Nexus, Amaterasu interjected, her tone brooking no further debate. The sacred anchor requires final stabilization before we depart. Taking the hint, Issei knelt once more beside the spring. With the artifact contained and the corruption purged, completing the anchor's restoration was straightforward. Using purely Eastern draconic energy this time, he established harmonic resonance with the spring's natural patterns, reinforcing the dimensional connections that had been targeted by the void corruption. As he worked, he reflected on the battle and its implications. The coordinated attack, the precisely placed artifact, the final cryptic message about the Supreme Dragon rising, too late, all suggested the void cultists were working toward specific goals related to the convergence. Most concerning was their particular interest in him personally. They had targeted him during his awakening and again now, suggesting his role in whatever was approaching held special significance to them. The artifact pulsed once more in his grip, and Issei contained it more firmly, cutting off its attempts to transmit or receive. Whatever information it held might prove crucial to understanding the larger threat they faced. With the anchor fully restored and stabilized, Issei rose to his feet. It's done. The connection is stronger than before. I reinforced it against future corruption attempts. Most impressive, Morrigan commented, studying him with undisguised interest. The Celtic Pantheon would value further discussion of your techniques. Our own anchor points have proven resistant to conventional purification. The council will coordinate any such exchanges, Kuranos interjected before Issei could respond. Under proper supervision protocols, of course. Amaterasu's expression revealed nothing, but Issei sensed her disapproval of the Greek representative's presumption. This one believes Issei Hyodo's training schedule remains under sponsor authority, not council oversight. For now, Kuranos acknowledged with a thin smile. Though recent events may necessitate review of those arrangements. The Mesopotamian representative gestured, opening a portal coup. I.e. different from the void tear. This one perfectly circular and stable, its edges limned with golden light. Nexus access established. Priority clearance granted for immediate return. As they prepared to step through the portal, Issei took a final look at the restored sacred site. Despite the battle's intensity, the clearing showed remarkably little damage. Amaterasu's barrier had protected the physical space even as they fought the void entities. The spring bubbled with renewed vigor, its purified waters catching sunlight in ways that revealed their spiritual significance to his enhanced perception. You did well, Amaterasu said quietly, momentarily dropping her formal speech pattern as she stood beside him. Few could have managed what you accomplished today. I still don't understand. And why they're targeting me specifically, Issei admitted. Or what role I'm supposed to play in this convergence they keep mentioning. Amaterasu's perfect features softened slightly. Understanding comes with time. For now, know that your actions today protected something precious, not just an anchor point, but the connections between worlds that maintain balance. Is that what the Supreme Dragon system was created for originally? Issei asked. Maintaining balance between dimensions. Perhaps, Amaterasu replied, "Or perhaps for restoring it when balance fails. We shall discover which together." With that enigmatic statement, she gestured for Issei to precede her through the portal. As he stepped into the gateway, the contained artifact pulsed once more against his palm, a final reminder that whatever had begun with his awakening was far from over. The Nexus library materialized around them, its impossible architecture a welcome sight after the tensions of the human world. Issei realized with surprise that despite the intensity of the day's events, he felt more centered than before, as if the practical application of his training had somehow accelerated his integration with the Supreme Dragon system. As council officials approached to take custody of the artifact and debrief the representatives, Issei caught Amaterasu watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, something beyond her usual composed observation, something almost personal. When their eyes met, she inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement before her perfect composure returned, the moment of connection passing but not forgotten. Whatever role the Supreme Dragon system was meant to play in the approaching convergence, Issei was beginning to understand that his connections to the Pantheon representatives, especially his 4 sponsors, would be as important as the power awakening within him. And among those connections, his relationship with Amaterasu was evolving in ways neither of them had anticipated. The custodian of the Nexus Library approached their group, its ever-shifting form currently resembling a scholarly figure with features that blended elements of all present pantheons. "The Council requests immediate conference regarding today's events," it announced, its multi-layered voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "All witnesses to attend. Priority classification assigned." As the representatives and Amaterasu prepared to follow the custodian to the conference chambers, Issei felt the prismatic gem in his hand pulse once more, not in response to external threat this time, but as if the Supreme Dragon system itself was acknowledging a significant moment in its evolution. Whatever came next, he was no longer merely reacting to his awakening. He was beginning to direct it, to shape the power rather than being shaped by it. And as the contained void artifact was carefully transferred to specialized containment fields for analysis, Issei couldn't shake the feeling that they had captured something more significant than anyone yet realized, perhaps the key to understanding the true nature of the approaching convergence, and his own role in what was to come. Chapter 3 End.